across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julie Hartley-Brewer. She's back tomorrow, of course, at 10 o'clock. It is the afternoon empire of sanity. Lots going on here. Donald Trump, of course, as you are now fully aware, warning Keir Starmer that he must slash taxes and end the Channel crisis if he hopes to defeat Nigel Farage, saying Labour's record-high tax hikes are ruinous immigration levels are driving voters straight to Reform UK, and he's right. We'll have more on that in a second. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is holding an emergency cabinet meeting today during the summer recess to discuss Gaza, focusing on aid delivery, ending the fighting and mounting pressure to recognise Palestine's statehood. We'll speak to one top senior barrister on this issue shortly. And shocking footage reveals migrants living in luxury at a West Sussex asylum hotel. The list is sort of endless here. PlayStation 5s, Apple Macs, free Wi-Fi, designer clothes, four-poster beds, even cigarettes, alcohol, a bit of weed being smoked in some of the rooms, sparking fury among hard-pressed British taxpayers. It's the only point in his entire career that Emmanuel Macron got it absolutely right. Stop the pull factor. If you think you're coming over here to get some of that, I'd be in a flipping boat, wouldn't you? 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Here's a question. Will Starmer take Trump's advice? Will Keir Starmer take Trump's advice? This was so much to talk about. We might come on to the Peter Kyle comments a little later as well. And I was a bit kind of torn whether we sort of kick off with Trump or the luxury migrant hotels. I mean, we're going to do both here because they do sort of interplay with each other on this. I mean, the Trump stuff from yesterday is absolutely gold. It's extraordinary that a foreign leader, a man in any other world who you wouldn't trust to mow your grass, seems to make it land every time in these very specific scenarios. It's almost as if you said to Donald Trump on his deathbed, what was the Where did you feel most comfortable in all of your time as a leader? I think he would say, my most comfortable moments when I was sitting right next to the person that I'm going to give an absolute slaughtering to. The person that I'm about to tear to shreds, not just in front of an assembled crowd, but in front of the world's media. That's where I was most at home. That's where I felt really comfortable. Like a cosy pair of slippers it was back then. That's how I think he would see it. I mean, talk about schooling. On Sunday, he made Ursula von der Leyen look like the work experience girl, and yesterday made our own Prime Minister look like the new kid in the class. Young Keir looking around thinking, it's not like this at the Islington dinner tables. I don't recognise this. This is how my advisers don't teach me to speak. It's very different, and that's the problem. That is the real problem that Keir Starmer and many others have as well. So this is really the point of this part of the discussion, I think. It's worth having a reminder and a little listen to what the head teacher said.
Politics is pretty simple. I assume there's a thing going on between you and Nigel, and it's okay, you know, it's two parties. But generally speaking, the one who cuts taxes the most, the one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars. He's kept you out of wars. But the one that keeps you out of wars, you know, you have a few basics, and you can go back 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, whoever does these things. But low taxes, keep us safe, keep us out of wars, no crime, stop the crime. And in your case, a big immigration component, you know, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration. But I think whoever's going to be, I think I won because
to establish what the issue is here. You make some logical promises to the electorate and you keep them. And the promises you make are on the fundamentals. So they're on things like energy prices. They're on areas such as taxes, lower taxes, sort immigration out. People will love you. And it's that. When you began to see, I mean, looking at Keir Starmer in that, quite genuinely, putting politics aside, he looked like a man that, frankly, I mean, I bet he wished he was wearing a nappy when they did that press conference. I mean, he looked like he was withholding at some point there. I mean, this was a very uncomfortable man. He was flushed. He looked as if he would rather be anywhere but where he was. An hour-and-a-half press conference, dominated 95% of the time by a foreign leader in his country. You can't write this. You cannot write this. And just to add to the melee of confusion in Keir Starmer's head on this, you have this extraordinary situation where he then says, look, this whole thing is between, you know, it's going to be a battle between you and Nigel, almost. Elevating what would any other day of the week have been a small party with 5 MPs, but they're dominating, they're punching above their weight. Love reform or hate reform. The fact is they are clearly going places and the direction of travel is northwards. The big green light is there on constant alert over there at Reform HQ. They're ready for action. And so there he is, pitting a foreign leader, pitting Nigel Farage against Keir Starmer while he sat right next to him. He's not talking about this in an interview or in his memoirs. This is in real time, right next to him. You've got to pull your finger out, Keir, in any other language. You know, you sort out taxes, you sort out immigration. Believe me, everything else falls into place. It's that simple. Why isn't it happening? It's not happening because Keir Starmer cannot, and I don't think this is even about, I mean, boy, have we had a lesson in the new form of politics in the last few years. This is not even about Keir Starmer politically being obtuse and saying, no, I don't believe that. I think this is more of it. He genuinely, every word that Donald Trump uttered, it's not that he doesn't want to believe it. He literally can't see it. He can't understand that. He can't get his head around that. You're spending 6 million, 7 million quid a day on asylum hotel. A day on asylum hotels. Well, people are living in shop doorways. Pensioners are living in mouldy flats. All manner of other issues when it comes to people who are just about keeping their head above water. And you're spending 6 million quid a day in hotels. And hotels, I appreciate it's not the story of every hotel. I'm sure there's some absolute stinkers out there that people are staying in. But you take the point. You've got a nice pair of Air Jordans. You've got yourself 3 meals a day. You've got warmth. You've got Marlboro Lights on tap. And if you fancy it, there's a nice cool Peroni waiting for you at the end. Really? You can't see that, Keir Starmer. You'd have to be a loon. And the more you think about it, you shouldn't just feel the incredulity of this. You should feel anger about this, real anger with Keir Starmer. We talk about Rishi Sunak. Yes, I know this happened under happened under Boris Johnson. They're not Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister right now. He's in charge of this. Donald Trump just told him some home truths. Sort that out, and Bob's your uncle, mate. You could be home and dry. I mean, in Starmer's case, I think the damage is already done very early into a premiership. But that's the basic mechanics of how this is meant to work. It's not hard to follow. But Starmer won't get, and they would have gone back to their... You had that idiot Khan when Trump had a bit of a pop at him. And what did he pop up with as a response? We are a place of diversity, said Sadiq Khan. We are rich and diverse. Why are you talking about... He didn't even raise diversity. But that's how they think, these people. So Starmer would have probably gone back to the Cabinet Office and go, oh, yeah, you know, what do you think, guys? God, he's such an idiot, isn't he? Yeah, he banged on about immigration and low taxes and stuff like that. Because they can't see it. I genuinely think they cannot see it. I'm not suggesting it's easy to run a country. I'm also not suggesting that running the United States of America is exactly the same as running the United Kingdom. There are fundamental differences, but predominantly that is the basic toolkit of electoral success is in low taxes, sorting out immigration and low energy bills. Bang. Job done. Thank you very much, Headmaster Trump. Will Starmer take his advice? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this from Theo Usherwood on this and the other big stories of the day. Afternoon to you, Theo.
Very good afternoon to you.
It was an extraordinary moment. I mean, it's not a surprising moment because this seems to be, as I said right at the beginning, this seems to be Trump's ultimate comfort zone by having big rants about the shortcomings of other people's countries while they're sitting right next to him. He seems to be in a very safe place when he does this.
The payback, of course, Ian, is that this is going to come back to haunt Keir Starmer, I suspect, in a couple of years' time, because if you remember, Donald Trump provided advice to Theresa May about how to do Brexit. She didn't follow that advice, and then he turned up for one of her last press conferences at Chequers and said, well, Theresa May, you didn't listen to how I told you to do Brexit. Yeah. And it was excruciating, that particular press conference, because Theresa May stood there and obviously she and her aides had decided to do Brexit in a very different way from Donald Trump. They decided to basically go along with what the EU suggested to secure a closer working relationship with the European Union as possible.
Yep.
And of course, Donald Trump is just pointing out some obvious facts there. But Keir Starmer, whilst he may get on with Donald Trump personally, they are two completely different political animals. We've seen the success that Donald Trump has had when it comes to cutting taxes, and that's because he's cut spending. He's gone in there with the Department of Government Efficiency and slashed spending right across the board. And many in America disagree with it, but that's how he gets taxes down. We've seen the action he's taken on the southern border. Keir Starmer isn't prepared, just as Rishi Sunak wasn't prepared to, just as Boris Johnson didn't go down that route initially, although he may have tried to had his premiership lasted any longer. But he's not prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and therefore it is impossible to set up some sort of deportation plan akin to Rwanda. And as Emmanuel Macron pointed out, and you when you were outlining the arguments that we're going to go through, your show's going to go through today, Ian, we've got to reduce the pull factors, and I think it's talk exclusive, isn't it? Those pictures from that.
They are indeed.
Hotel.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one example, and even if many people I've seen on social media saying, but not all hotels are like that. There are some are absolutely awful. That people. That's not the point. You only need one to be like that, but for the question to be raised, what's going on here?
And I'd no doubt think that somewhere across the channel, I'm sure some of the gang leaders will be on X, and they'll follow your account, and they'll be showing the footage to people who are umming and ahhing about getting in the dinghy across the channel and saying,
have a look at what you can get.
They're available to you. Yeah. This is and it is a possibility, right? So on top of that, we haven't even got onto the fact that you can get a job working for one of the food delivery companies, and that's
can even get a job in addition to everything else. You might even be able to get a job
and get money on top of it.
Money on top of it. Money on the side.
And you don't have to pay for rent, and you don't have to pay for
nothing. You're nice and warm, 3 meals a day, and some nice Air Jordans. Let's have I think we need to have a reminder, by the way. I know I played it about 5 minutes ago, Thea, but let's have another listen then too. That schooling moment when head teacher Trump decided to explain to the new boy what needs to be done to win an election. Here he is.
Politics is pretty simple. It's I assume there's a thing going on between you and Nigel, and it's okay. It's two parties. But generally speaking, the one who cuts taxes the most, the one who gives you the lowest energy prices and the best kind of energy, the one that keeps you out of wars. He's kept you out of wars. But the one that keeps you out of wars, you have a few basics, and you can go back 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, whoever does these things, but low taxes, keep us safe, keep us out of wars, no crime, stop the crime. And in your case, a big immigration component, because I know that your attitude has become strong on immigration, strong on the toughness of immigration. But I think whoever's going to be, I think I won because we had a lousy president, to be honest with you. We had an incompetent president. But I won because I was very strong on immigration.
And there it is. And I don't think he's wrong about that, Theo, even allowing for some Trump hyperbole. I think what he said there at the very beginning is all pretty simple.
Yes, it's straightforward. It's straightforward, but Keir Starmer sits at that table. I just can't take, his facial expression it's like he's got three wasps in his mouth, stinging him, but he's determined not to let them fly out as he purses his lips.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say because he can't. In terms of cutting taxes, he decided to announce £10 billion worth of public sector pay rises last year, 22% to the junior doctors, 14% to the trained drivers. They put more money into the NHS, but that money needs to come from somewhere. And so we saw £40 billion of tax rises last autumn in the budget. We're bracing ourselves now for further tax rises in the autumn because the economy is not going anywhere nearly as well as it needs to in order for anybody to even think about cutting taxes. It was really interesting watching the Chancellor Rachel Reeves in front of a Lords Committee just before MPs broke for the summer recess. And she was, Labour had made great play of the fact that under the Conservatives, tax burden had reached a 70-year high, so that taxes made up 35% of GDP. It now stands at 38% of GDP, and there was no message in there from the Chancellor as she faced peers that she had any intention of being able to cut taxes in the slightest. So there's really, unless this government's willing to cut public spending, it can't now even cut public spending because we saw the revolt from Labour MPs.
Yep.
And unless it's willing to remove this country from the ECHR, which Keir Starmer has said adamantly that he's not, because of course he doesn't want to jeopardise relations with our European partners, there is no way that he can make good on those suggestions from Donald Trump. And it's very likely, and you made the point about how well Reform is doing in the polls, that Nigel Farage is going to win the next election in 2029, or even perhaps a year earlier, either as the Reform being the overall party in power with a Commons majority, or just with the Tories picking up the loose ends just to get Nigel Farage over the line. And Keir Starmer and Labour could very well, indeed the bookies have it down as their most likely prospect, be in opposition.
Yeah. We will, we'll have the popcorn at the ready over the next few years, never going away, frankly. Stay with us, Theo. Loads more stories still to come, including that issue around the asylum hotel and the living conditions at one particular place in Sussex. And Farage is on the side of Jimmy Savile, so says a government minister, talking absolute cobblers. And frankly, rather crude and unnecessary cobblers at that. Details on the way. And that question, will Starmer take Trump's advice? 0344 499 1000.
this was obviously someone who needed to be taken off the streets, who needed to be dealt with, who needed to be put in some kind of institution, and yet because he didn't fit into one category or the other, it was a computer says no.
It was totally, yeah.
So, and then it's because of that kind of fundamental failure, because of the fact that this is the sort of thing that people have almost come to expect from a government and a state that seemingly can't keep even its most vulnerable citizens safe. It's precisely that mistrust of the establishment which helps create the kind of atmosphere that we saw afterwards.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There's one in from John in Sutton who says, after what we saw in Scotland, we need Farage for Prime Minister as soon as possible. Thank you, John, for that. Esme says, Ian, pure comedy gold yesterday. Trump slapping Starmer's backside was the best thing I've seen in months. I keep having to play it back to cheer myself up and give myself a laugh. At least Zelensky, when he was confronted by Trump, defended himself and answered back. I know Starmer won't take his advice because he's too arrogant, blinkered, has this ridiculous ideology that he can't see outside his own window. And that's it, isn't it? I mean, the advice is... shouldn't even need that advice as a Prime Minister. What do you think your obligations are to the British people? Lower taxes, cheaper energy bills, lower immigration, and not spending 6, 7, 8 million quid a day on hotels while you've got a housing crisis for indigenous Brits. I mean, it is pretty simple stuff. 24 minutes after 1. Theo Usherwood, the political commentator, is with us, and it feeds into this story. Theo, footage has been revealed showing migrants living in luxury at an asylum hotel. PlayStations, designer clothes and other lavish perks are on the agenda, it seems. While Brits face rising bills and housing shortages, it's worth having a little look at this.
I have been quite surprised at the level of luxury that is enjoyed by many of the residents who live at Copthorne Hotel. When I thought of the term illegal migrant hotel, I definitely had a far less luxurious accommodation in my mental image. Perhaps what I found more surprising is the level of affluence of some of the residents themselves as well. So before the housekeeping staff make their rounds, the bedrooms do get rather messy. I mean, you can see here cigarettes and weed and ash all over the tables, banana skins left everywhere, bags of rubbish on the floor, weed grinder, weed and ash all over the desk. In stark contrast to the relative luxury enjoyed by the service users at Copthorne Hotel, in the staff accommodation block, where I have kindly been gifted a room for the duration of my stay, is anything but a luxurious 4-star hotel. The rooms are like boxes, there's no Wi-Fi, no televisions, the signal is terrible. It is literally a box with a bed and a sink.
Wow. I mean, there's something in that, Theo, isn't there? And it does rather feed into the problems facing Keir Starmer.
That's from a talk listener who sent that in. Is that right, Ian?
It was Isabel Oakeshott was the person behind obtaining that. So it wasn't our footage, but somebody else got hold of that, and we were able to procure it as an exclusive.
What was that? There was a 4-poster bed in there.
4-poster bed. Yep.
PlayStation 5. They don't come cheap. They're worth several. There were several hundred pounds. Yeah. So it's and this is of course the danger is that actually more broadly, I mean, you look at that footage, and the concerning thing is, and we touched upon this earlier, is that actually that just ends up as a pull factor to make the situation worse. Yeah. That footage, that it spreads like wildfire on the internet, on X, on your accounts, and Isabel's got a high profile as well, and that it finds its way into the hands of those who are trying to either sell tickets or make money out of the misery of trafficking people across the English Channel, and it's a very persuasive piece of footage if you're thinking that you're coming from a country in the Middle East or in North Africa, indeed further south now, as many migrants are making that journey, and you see that footage and you see what's potentially on offer. And there is no sense from either ministers or indeed civil servants working in the Home Office or beyond that they want to that they have any ambition or desire to try and reduce that pull factor. And I think it's worth noting, of course, that this situation is going to get worse, because as more people travel across the English Channel and the Home Office decides to put them into hotel accommodation, that accommodation is going to get better and better and better, because of course as this problem has developed, the government has started by trying to doing the obvious thing of procuring the cheapest possible hotels in order to save the taxpayer money, as you would expect them to do. But that accommodation now is running out, and they need to find other accommodation, and that means that they have to go, they start at 1 or 2 star as a hotel, and then they have to go on to 3 or 4 star, and you can see how the problem is just going to get worse and worse.
And we saw that with the Canary Wharf hotel.
Exactly, with the Britannia Hotel, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of the rooms going for like £400 a night.
It's a tasty old gaff, to coin a phrase.
And it has, I'm sure they won't be given access, but it has a spa and unparalleled views over the Thames towards central London. It is a very, you can see how that acts as a, as an offer to somebody who wants to make that crossing. It's much better than anything that they've been ever used to.
Indeed.
And it's going to get, and like I said, it's going to get worse, because the cheaper accommodation is running out. The bill is going to go higher. It's going to cost the taxpayer more money, and it's going to cause, in many of your listeners will just feel this real sense of grievance that at the same time the government it wants to cut money for children with learning difficulties or disabilities to receive the right educational placements. We saw what happened, the toxicity around the winter fuel allowance cut, that were it not for the Runcorn and Holsby by-election, where it came up on pretty much every doorstep, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves probably wouldn't have listened, because of course they lost their 16th safest Labour seat in that by-election at the beginning of May. So this is a situation that's going to become more damaging as people get more and more angry and frustrated at what's happening.
Listen, let's just finish on this story. It'll have to be brief, Theo. Peter Kyle, for those who don't know, he's the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, has sparked outrage, understandably, by accusing Nigel Farage of siding with sex offenders for pledging to scrap the Online Safety Act. Reform UK has slammed the Act as a tool to suppress free speech and censor anti-government views, claiming it fails to protect kids anywhere. Let's have a listen to what the Minister said.
You have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence. Nigel Farage is on their side. Make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side.
If Jimmy Savile was alive today, I doubt whether he would be online doing whatever it was he was doing, but that's hardly the point here, Theo. Brief answer, if we can. It's another one of those examples that really just hands another load of goals to Reform and Nigel Farage.
But you remember back in 2022 when Boris Johnson accused Keir Starmer of failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile while he was running the CPS. The howls of outrage at those comments, and from the Labour benches at the way that the Prime Minister at the time implicated Keir Starmer and the slur that he brought against Keir Starmer. I'm struggling to see the difference with these particular comments. The thing about online safety, it's a really complex debate, and the advice from the tech companies is that if you unlock WhatsApp, if you reduce the encryption to WhatsApp, or if you take away the encryption to your bank details and you can't do that selectively, so that everybody recognises that the government needs to be able to crack the paedophile rings, to come down hard on organised crime. If you start unpicking the technology, you can't unpick it just for the good guys.
Yeah.
If you unpick the technology, you unpick it for everybody, and that makes online safety, which we all come to rely on for storing all of our personal information, our bank information, and just doing our business. You make us much less, you compromise that. And it's a really complex debate. And I just question why a minister would go on the television this morning and start, in this particular area, aligning Jimmy Savile as a line to Nigel Farage.
Indeed. The debate warrants more intelligence, if nothing else, than comments like that. Theo, always great. Thank you, Theo Ashworth, political commentator with us. We're going to get a couple of voices on Trump and migrants in a second. Gavin Mortimer from The Spectator is with us, and our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, is on too. Over to you, 03444991000. On the hotels, on what you've been seeing in those pictures, if you're watching, or hearing if you're listening on radio. Comments on that as well. Will Starmer take Trump's advice is one of the questions we've got out there. Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one from June in West Brom, who says Labour Party sent Peter Kyle out to say something outrageous to try and take the pressure off our bozo Prime Minister's meeting with Trump. It does make you think like that, doesn't it? Making themselves look even more useless than they were before. More comment from you, 87222. You want to send a message in to us. And if you want to send a voice note, it's always a unique way to bypass the crowds. Usual number, of course, 0344 499 1000. So Donald Trump has given Keir Starmer a bit of a blunt lesson on how to win an election, cut taxes, lower energy bills and stop the boats. I mean, it's kind of simple stuff. The US president warns Labour's high taxes and soft immigration stance are handing Nigel Farage and Reform UK a clear advantage. He also tore into Sadiq Khan, never a bad thing, calling him a nasty person. He said he's done a terrible job as London's mayor. But will Starmer heed Trump's advice? In a moment, we'll speak to Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor. First, Gavin Mortimer, columnist with The Spectator. Afternoon to you, Gavin. I mean, we've seen Trump do this a load of times, most famously, of course, with Zelensky. I mean, that really was a bit more of a royal row, almost a fight in the Oval Office. On Sunday, Ursula von der Leyen got a similar treatment. It seems to be Trump's comfort zone to say pretty controversial things, or certainly off-piste things, while sitting literally right next to the person he's slaughtering. And yesterday it was our own Prime Minister who took his turn in the ducking stall, as it were.
Yeah, and controversial, or is he just telling the truth here? And I think he's telling the truth a lot of the time. You may not approve of his style, but the substance of what Trump says, as Peter Mandelson said himself not so long ago, there's a kernel of truth in everything Trump says. Yep. Indeed, there is. And frankly, I prefer Trump's form of politics diplomacy to what we saw recently when Macron came to London, and he and Starmer were over each other like a bad suit and hugging and this bromance stuff, and it's just distasteful to watch. So it's uncomfortable, yes, but what Trump is saying is fundamentally true, whether it's about these horrible windmills, an issue in France incidentally, or whether it's about mass migration. Will Starmer listen? I doubt it.
Yeah. I mean, of course, Starmer's whole point, I mean, at the very beginning, when he first turned up yesterday to meet Donald Trump, of course, he sort of belched out this, we've deported 35,000 people. And, there's a bit more to the backstory of what he was saying there. We deport roughly that amount of people anyway on any given year, because people do get deported despite the heady numbers of people coming in. But, of course, the point I always make on these things, Gavin, it's not in Starmer's DNA, any of this, is it? It's not in his heart. It's not that he doesn't believe, he doesn't see it, so therefore he doesn't believe it. When you talk about immigration, as far as he's concerned, this is a humanitarian crisis. His legal background points him in that direction, and he can't really see beyond that.
Absolutely not, and Macron's the same.
Correct.
It is, as you said, it's in their DNA. They are fundamentally free movement, open borders. And I mean, it's interesting, Ian, because a couple of weeks ago I didn't get much coverage in the British media, but Germany announced that it was cutting the funding to its NGO boats in the Mediterranean, who were really, I think, more than anyone, even more than probably the gangs responsible for the migrant crisis, because they just cruise up and down the Mediterranean off the coast of North Africa, picking up migrants and then transporting them over to Italy. And that's the way to do it. If you want to stop all this stuff about smashing the gangs, no, it's tackling the NGOs and the human rights industry, the lawyers who make huge amounts of money. And the report yesterday that you featured heavily on Talk, with the astonishing footage from the Copthorne Hotel in West Sussex, where incidentally, that rang a bell, and I stayed there 10 years ago, and I looked it up. I trawled out my emails. It cost me £87.60 to stay the night there. Lovely hotel back in the day, but from the footage I saw on Talk yesterday, not so good now. But this is so symptomatic of the crisis. There's a lot of people making a lot of money out of this crisis, and it's not in their interest to end it. And one wonders if, as you said, is it in the interest of Labour, or not so much the interest, is it the desire of this government to end the migrant crisis? And I think a great many Britons think it isn't. Yeah,
and I thought Trump's point at the beginning, when he said, look, it's quite simple. I know that the sort of manifestation of sorting big problems, international problems, is sometimes like turning an oil tanker around, but the principle is really simple. You lower taxes, you have cheaper energy bills, and you sort migration out. I mean, it's very... of course, Starmer has failed spectacularly on all of those things. And even if you said, well, he's only been there a year, fine, but he's not even talking the talk on this stuff. Again, there's no sense that, OK, he's having a rocky time, he inherited some bad figures, if he wanted to be generous, but don't worry, give it a year, he's going to be onto this. You sort of know he won't be.
Absolutely. He's got no charisma, no oomph about him. And as you just alluded to, Ian, and as Trump said, politics is simple. We saw an example of that 10 years ago with the Australians, Tony Abbott, who wanted to bring migration down to practically zero. He did that by pushing back the boats. It wasn't popular. There were howls of anguish from left-wing politicians in Australia and, again, the human rights industry. But he stuck to his game. He showed determination and he showed courage, Ian. Has Starmer got either of those qualities? I don't think he has. Spot on. Gavin, great to have you on. We will speak again soon. Gavin Mortimer is columnist with The Spectator. Let's speak to Isabel, Oakeshott Talk's international editor. Afternoon to you, Isabel. I mean, every now and again there is a story
that you think, wow, this really is, you know, I mean, Trump is the gift that keeps on giving in one respect, and so is Keir Starmer for very different reasons. And, you know, what we saw yesterday was very Trump-like, but it becomes more pronounced when it's our own Prime Minister that's sitting next to him like a told-off schoolboy.
So funny, isn't it? I mean, there is no senior leader in the world that has quite this style that Trump does, where it's literally like he just says whatever it is that's in his head, you know, which was that Sadiq Khan is a very nasty man, or a nasty man, and he's doing a terrible job. And there was Starmer sitting there looking super awkward and feeling that he had to interject and say that Sadiq Khan is a friend of his, and Trump just plows on anyway, saying that he's doing a terrible job. I mean, these were home truths, if ever there were home truths from a political leader, casting aside all diplomacy, because he just doesn't care, does he?
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. And I keep saying this and have done since the beginning. It seems that these particular scenarios, whether it's Zelensky or Ursula von der Leyen and yesterday Trump, they seem to be the real comfort zone for Donald Trump. He sort of fires up and then he can't stop, particularly when he's, you know, schooling somebody. I don't use that word just as casually. I mean, genuinely, that's exactly what he was doing. He, you know, even mentioned Nigel Farage. It would have been unthinkable that somebody would previously have mentioned a leader that has just 5 MPs, but we know they are batting, you know, far harder and higher than that in the polls, and the projection of travel is very positive for reform. So he threw that in there as well. Again, Starmer, very uncomfortable. Theo Usherwood said a second ago, looked like a man who had 3 wasps in his mouth and probably wearing a nappy at the same time while all of this was going on. I mean, it was painful to see. And Trump really, and Starmer really did look uncomfortable with this.
Well, you might have found it painful. I found it quite amusing, and I think a lot of our listeners will have been delighted to see Starmer being told a few simple things about realities about immigration and tax and so on. I mean, the Donald tried to make it a little bit less agony for Starmer when he said, well, you know, immigration is very important, and I hear you getting tough on that. And I thought, no, he isn't. Yeah. You know, giving him credit where it's not due there. So while Starmer winced, the whole nation, I think, well, a great deal of the nation anyway, was silently applauding someone who was bold enough just to say it as it is, really.
Yeah, spot on. And it feeds into the other story that we've been looking at, life inside migrant hotels, and this particular hotel in Sussex, where a whistleblower, Aston Knight, has filmed asylum seekers living what appears to be a fairly opulent lifestyle, bearing in mind we are talking about people who are meant to have been fleeing tyrannical regimes and are destitute, and the most, I think Owen Jones used the phrase, the most vulnerable people on earth. I don't think that's what we're seeing, and I don't think we're also seeing living conditions that anyone would expect to reflect what you might call a humanitarian response. This is lots of money being spent, it's very opulent, and we should all be shocked, and not shocked and saddened, but shocked and angry at these images, Isabel.
Well, I was personally genuinely taken aback by the scale of what is going on in that particular migrant hotel. And there's no suggestion that it's not representative. I mean, not all migrant hotels are quite as beautiful looking as the interior and exterior of this particular one, the Copthorne. I think it's in Sussex, not too far from Gatwick Airport. Yep. But the scale of all the services that are being deployed to keep the migrants living in this lap of luxury is quite astonishing. We're showing now, for those who can't see it, the daily meal timing schedule, breakfast, lunch and dinner. They've got a good couple of hours in each slot to decide what time they want to eat, and it's all sort of halal and vegetarian veggie boxes for those who don't want to eat even halal meat. But it's not just the 3 meals a day, and you know, they get also a 4th meal that's hand delivered to each of their bedrooms mid-afternoon, snacks and cakes and whatever else, sandwiches that they might be needing between their 3 meals a day. And every single day, according to our source, who lived for 3 months amongst this community, if I can call it that, the police are there every day. What you see there, for those who aren't watching, fleet of taxis turning up all the time. These are paid for all by the taxpayer. Landlines by beds are still connected and can make international calls. Every day you've got mental health services involved, you've got the NHS involved in different shapes and forms, you've got a massive production line of laundry to process, and one kind of service after another being provided, even musical entertainment. There's footage from inside the hotel of the residents being given some kind of concert and then being taught how to use musical instruments. This is just way, way, way off the chart when it comes to fulfilling our moral obligations to give refuge to a fair proportion of the world's dispossessed. That is another question. Yeah. What we are doing in these settings is not fulfilling a basic moral obligation. We are going wildly over the top and creating a fantastic incentive for the world's opportunists to come knocking on our door. And that door 100%. Opens every time.
And that's exactly the point, isn't it? You're never going to see Keir Starmer at a press conference get angry about that. You're never going to see him stand there and say, I can't believe what I was seeing. This is not what I had in mind. This is not what assistance is meant to look like. Regardless of where you sit on the debate of immigration, this is going to stop now. You'll never hear that. You'll just hear him parrot a line that a SPAD has given him. You know, we are looking into this to find out what has happened. And that's as far as it will go. And that's the Trump difference, isn't it? That's where you want to. That's where Nigel Farage would stand up, incredulous, and talk with real passion from the heart about how unacceptable this has to be.
Exactly that, from the heart. And the thing is that Keir Starmer just doesn't get it. You know, I'd love to sit down with him and watch him watching that footage and just see how he reacts. And I'm afraid to say, I think he might just be a bit shrugging about it. You know, I might continue to talk about these poor people. But it's quite evident from the footage and the evidence from the source, who, as I say, was fully integrated with these occupiers of the hotel and the management and so on, that these are not downtrodden, dispossessed people. These are people who are gathering designer clothes and jewellery. Now, it may, of course, be rip-off brands, probably is, but they've also found the means, in most cases, to pay thousands of dollars to get over on the boat. Now, they come from countries of origin where the annual income is, on average, I've looked into this, $2,000 to $3,000. That's the entire annual income just to pay the boat fare. It doesn't stack up, does it? And once they get there, according to our source and plenty of other evidence besides, the majority of men are working on the black market. And scandalously, the hotel management, these are companies that are paid vast sums of money from the public purse to run these migrant hotels, is fully aware that their residents are going out and about working in jobs. Now, that is illegal, and in my opinion, it is on the management of the hotel. It's their responsibility to bring in the Home Office, to bring in Border Force and say, our residents are working. What are you going to do? Answer to what you're going to do. You're going to deport them forthwith because they broke the law coming in and they continue to break the law once they're in our country.
And as Theo Usherwood mentioned a moment ago, Isabel, we're probably going to see more of this because the government has sort of run out of the 2-star and 3-star hotels. So now, and we saw what happened at Canary Wharf with the Britannia Hotel there, we're likely to see more images of opulence as these people are put into ever more pricey digs, as it were.
Well, good luck to the government if they do that, because every time there's an example of this, it increases community tension. It certainly plays into the hands of opposition politicians. And I would just urge any hotel company that's thinking of taking this dirty dime to think twice about it. There are certain hotel operators, I think I'm right in saying the Premier Inn being one of them, that are just categorically refusing to have anything to do with this filthy racket. And I'm sorry, that is what it has become. It is a racket. There are far too many unethical, unscrupulous businesses feeding off this dirty industry. And 100%. What they're doing effectively is transferring taxpayers' money into their own pockets.
Listen, great stuff, Isabel. Thank you, as ever. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
as well as solar and all the rest of it. But we need to get serious about this, because the technologies of the future, if we're going to hope to compete, when you go on your ChatGPT or your Grok or something, or even Google and look something up now, you're using huge amounts of energy for the great big data centers that artificial intelligence require. And we are going to get left in the dirt unless we get real on this. The answer, in my humble opinion, is to get real about nuclear energy. It's why the French are so much better than us on this respect only.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 5 to 2. Let's go to Ben in Essex. What have you got for us, Ben? Afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian. Good to speak to you again.
You too.
Yeah, this is Starmer and Trump. It's as laughable as it is. I don't believe that Trump for 1 second doesn't know what Starmer is like. I honestly don't believe that about Trump. You know, he's a strategic guy. He's been around the block a little bit.
100%.
He must see through Starmer.
Oh, he would. I mean, bearing in mind, you know, how big Trump's business has been. I know he's had, you know, he's had some interesting experiences in running businesses, but nonetheless, nobody, you know, he's been around boardrooms with the biggest and the most powerful and the most dynamic characters. He knows a Starmer when he sees one.
Absolutely, and of course he's got the finger on the pulse about what's happening, and I honestly think that he does speak to Farage. It might not be publicly, but in some way, shape or form, he's obviously speaking to him, and I think Trump was just playing him. I really do, and the thing is, as funny as it is, it's also demoralising for our public as well. You know, it might be fun watching him and seeing that, but as a British person, seeing our leader get eaten like that, and what's going on with all these migrant hotels, it's terrible. I just wish that Trump would put him in the bin.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about it is that I think Trump has a bit of a loyalty to the UK. Because, you know, his mother is Scottish, British born, and he likes the royal setup and all of that. So I think he likes the country. So that's why Starmer gets a little bit more slack than I think he would have done if it was anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, we've got a monarchy here, and it's a very respected thing, and it's a beautiful thing, and I think many countries look up to us in some way, but we are being absolutely eroded and destroyed. I mean, I loved it when he shot down Sadiq Khan. You know,
beautiful moment. Yeah, and Sadiq Khan's response was something about we are a very diverse city, which doesn't even address anything that Trump was saying.
It doesn't even. It is the thing is, people. I don't get that they must. I think they must be. They're mentally ill.
Yeah.
Or they're puppeteers. I don't know what's happening, but the thing is, he's right what he said there, Trump, about, you know, winning an election and what you should be. I mean, that is just standard that you'd expect from a leader. Keep us out of wars, keep taxes low, try and get the economy thriving, keep us safe. That is standard play.
Wouldn't you? I mean, if you were Trump, if you were Starmer, or if you were anyone worth their salt, you'd go to either the Royal Navy tomorrow or one of the big shipping companies. So what's the biggest ship we've got available to us? Because we're going to hire it now, stick it in the middle of the channel, all those people in hotels, we're going to gather all of those people and we will treat them all with absolute dignity. Nobody wants to be mean. We will put them all on that ship until we can process them and they will stay there. Now, I know that's probably easier said than done, but if there was some kind of action, because that's what you would see in America, right? You'd see Trump act. What we see with Starmer is complete inaction.
Without a doubt. I mean, you're right what you say, Louis, and I completely agree. And do you know what? If he did that, Starmer, tomorrow, he'd have complete backing of the British public.
Yeah, I might even vote for him myself. Well, that's a silly thing to say, but take the point.
We want to see the Royal Navy out there rounding these people up, pushing them away. You know, he talks about smashing the gangs, but, we've got enough resources to do that.
You'd think so, and at the moment he's simply smashing any chance he has of getting re-elected in 2029. Listen, Ben, I've got to run because the news is upon us, but great call to start us off. More where that came from, 0344 499 1000. Will Starmer take Trump's advice? It's just one of the questions. Those images you've been seeing from that migrant hotel. Peter Kyle's comment, read Jimmy Savile and Nigel Farage, absolutely outrageous stuff, but he went there. Kyle went there. And more from you on the other side of the news at 2, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, right here at the home of Common Sense. Welcome back to Talk. We're talking Donald Trump warning Prime Minister yesterday, Keir Starmer, that he's got to slash taxes, sort migration out, for goodness sake, if he hopes to defeat the likes of Nigel Farage, saying Labour's record high tax hikes are ruinous, and also immigration levels driving voters straight to Reform UK. I mean, there's not a person in the world that could possibly argue with Donald Trump's assessment of where we're at, even if you loathe Donald Trump and are normally a Starmer supporter. Everything he said is bang on. So will Starmer heed Donald Trump's advice? Don't hold your breath, but what do you think? Lines are open on that. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is demanding an apology after a cabinet minister, Peter Kyle, accused him of siding with predators like Jimmy Savile over online safety laws. It's an extraordinary anti-intellectual rant of mumbo-jumbo nonsense from Kyle. Where he was getting this from, why he went there, to coin a phrase, is another story. We'll have more on that. And an emergency cabinet meeting is being held today during the summer recess to discuss Gaza, focusing on aid delivery, ending the fighting and mounting pressure to recognise Palestinian statehood. We'll talk to one lawyer on this very issue shortly. 0344 499 1000. And by the way, just as I was reading that out, that they're having a special meeting, even though it's during summer recess. Why did the cabinet take off the whole of the summer? They're running the flipping country, for God's sake. There shouldn't be a recess for cabinet ministers. No matter which department you're from, you can have your fortnight's holiday, maybe stagger it. So, you know, the culture department is on holiday at a different time from agriculture. You don't want any kind of bovine clash going on between those two areas. But why is that somehow marked out as a moment? It's a cabinet meeting during recess. Should be one every week. Stop it. This comes in from Mark, who says the situation with illegal migrant hotels is beyond belief. I very much doubt that many British people will be able to afford a few nights in that hotel. Never mind living there indefinitely. The whole thing stinks to high heavens, like their hotel rooms, probably. I mean, that's the point to all of this, because it comes against a backdrop not just of the fact that this is incredibly, jaw-droppingly expensive for the taxpayer, but the backdrop is that loads of local families, there'll be families a stone's throw from that hotel that are really struggling to pay bills. They don't get any of what these people will be getting. Now, OK, you could say, well, it's not the migrants' fault they got put there. They could have been in a two-star hotel in Grimsby, but they happen to be put there. That's just the way it is. Well, that shouldn't be just the way it is, right? I mean, that's the whole point to this. Somebody could sort this out, and nobody has the political will, which goes back to the point that Donald Trump was trying to make to Keir Starmer yesterday. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Alex Dean, the political commentator, is back with us. Alex, good to see you again.
Ian, great to see you.
Listen, well, let's start off with that Trump story. I mean, it's such an incredible story of how this played out yesterday. It's not new territory for Trump. He loves having a bit of a dig and an expose while sitting literally next to the person that he's tearing strips off. He did it in a fairly polite, subtle way, you might say, but nonetheless, it was a telling off and it was a schooling for our Prime Minister in our country by a foreign leader.
Well, it's just how Donald Trump behaves, isn't it? And it's probably another reason you or I might not choose to have him as a dinner party guest. But I'm quite glad he's President of the United States, especially compared to the dross that the Democratic Party has been turning up for in recent years. But look, moreover, it's great that he's here and that he's positive about the United Kingdom. And by the way, for what it's worth, he treats lots of other world leaders much worse than he treated Keir Starmer.
Yes, yeah, I think
the treating he gave Zelensky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Trump genuinely likes this country, and he likes Arceta, he likes the royal family. He's into all of that. You know, his mother's Scottish. All of the above. So I think he maybe cut Starmer a little bit of slack. He tries to throw the odd compliment in there every now and then. Oh, he's a strong negotiator and stuff like that. But broadly speaking, what he said to him yesterday was very basic common sense stuff, wasn't it? You know, you sort out immigration, you sort out energy, you sort out these kind of issues, low taxes, and you might win the election.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the points that the President made to our Prime Minister. But then again, I stood as a Conservative Party candidate at the last election and we got our asses handed to us by the Labour Party. So, you know, Keir Starmer's got a mandate to deliver on what he's trying to do. Yeah. But I think, Ian, a pattern is becoming increasingly clear. Keir Starmer, strong internationally, and I include his relationship with Donald Trump, which is a net positive, weak domestically. And the problem for him is that Prime Ministers in the past show us that's generally the wrong way round.
Yeah, and he seems like so many of those guys. I always have the names that always spring to mind. No longer there Justin Trudeau, still there just Emmanuel Macron, and no longer there Jacinda Ardern from down in New Zealand. Those sort of internationalists that love that. Rishi Sunak was kind of slightly cut from a similar cloth. I know you might not comment in the same way on that, but the people, but Keir Starmer absolutely loves it. You know, he seems more at home standing at a G7 or some international summit than he does sitting at home trying to work out why the hell we are paying £7 million a day to house people who shouldn't even be here.
Yeah, I mean, that's bonkers, and he's got our domestic policy pretty comprehensively wrong. I mean, very impressive to get it so wrong so quickly in only a year. Yeah. But if you're going to make that comparison, consider the way that Donald Trump is with Ursula von der Leyen. I think far more hostile to the Eurocrats than he is to our Prime Minister, and that is to Starmer's credit.
Yeah, and I absolutely right. And I think, you know, Trump with the whole EU thing, you know, sees it as a bit of a racket, which lots of us have identified for years, of course. Yeah. And, you know, there was Mr. Trump just sort of laying it on the line to Ursula on Sunday. I mean, certainly when I first saw the clip of that, Alex, there was Trump within the frame on my TV talking about how the EU had got it so terribly wrong and migration is out of control, and then the camera pulls out. She's sitting next to him. Yeah. I thought it's another one of those great moments that only Trump can deliver.
Yeah, he's not wrong, and the EU has a real migration policy. It's very interesting. They're now looking at an alternative to, would you believe it, Rwanda, to sending illegal migrants. They're replacing borders that they said they were going to take down. They've had to reverse themselves. And after a long time of basically implying the UK was some sort of international racist holding our positions, not only are some of their member states, like Hungary and Poland, aggressively pursuing the same sort of position as we have in trying to deter unlawful migration, but the EU itself is too. So Donald Trump is right about it, but it looks like the EU's got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, and it feeds into this story as well that we've been also talking about this afternoon, the life of luxury inside certain migrant hotels. Footage from inside that, well, the whole industry is about £7 million a day to keep this thing running and rising, because of course it's not stopping every day. No. This gets worse. The whistleblower Aston Knight filmed asylum seekers living in luxury at the Copthorne Hotel in Sussex, and of course this is, as I said a second ago, just down the road you've got Brits who can hardly manage the rent. This is a terrible position. It's a terrible image for Keir Starmer. My sense, however, Alex, is that nothing's going to change and we won't hear a robust response from the Prime Minister.
Well, Keir Starmer, of course, got into office, at least in part, on the promise to smash the gangs. Some more credulous people in the media said that was his policy. It was great. Labour finally had a policy, and the policy was smashing the gangs. Well, if this is smashing them, I'd hate to see what a laissez-faire approach would be. I mean, the worst thing of all about this is the way that our government treats anyone who disagrees with the current policy, which is most of us, implying that we are right-wing, far-right. There's something of the fascist about people who don't want this in their local community or don't want the hotel they've known all their lives as a nice place for their relatives to stay if they've got a big group coming over, to house a large group of almost exclusively young men with nothing to do. Yeah. The knee-jerk reaction of our establishment now to claim everything is far-right is crying wolf too much. And I think that's the lesson that the Prime Minister on down they've got to learn. Dismissing everyone who's got a problem with how things aren't fascist, and calling them fascists is absurd.
I was talking to a couple of mates at the weekend as well, and one of them has always been very opinionated and animated on these specific issues. It's something he feels incredibly strongly about and has he said that he's discovering more and more people, just, whether it's in the pub, on the train, at work, are engaging in this conversation that maybe previously wouldn't have done. It's now it's hitting places that it previously didn't go.
Well, it used to be that, the merest whiff of the suggestion that you were a racist would shut down any sort of debate. Yeah. And we've gone past that now. They've cried wolf far too many times. They've called far too many people who are moderate and mainstream. They're not extremists. They're not in the EDL or whatever. They're perfectly normal British people who just don't think we should have effectively unfettered access to unlawful migrants or undocumented migrants from around the world. And then they pick up on things like Nigel Farage calling boats going over and taking people over the channel a taxi service. Well, don't dismiss it, because actually that's what it looks like to a lot of people.
Yeah, spot on. And this story, talking about Nigel Farage, a curious moment today on TV when Peter Kyle, the science minister, sparked outrage by claiming that Nigel Farage is on the side of paedophiles like Jimmy Savile. This is over the online safety laws, which have sort of come out a couple of days ago and causing all sorts of problems. Many people saying that these were designed almost to stop free speech. It's not quite true, but it seems to be the manifestation of it.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, if people are okay to vote at 16, then why are we putting them in a digital kindergarten until 18 and saying they can't go online? The poor little darlings need to be protected from the evils of the online world, but they're okay to vote. But anyway, the Peter Kyle position is a stupid one as far as I'm concerned. The government had a 3-line whip against a national inquiry into grooming gangs earlier this year. I mean, did that mean they were in favour of grooming then? Claiming that people who disagree with you are actively in favour of the absolute extreme, which is what, you're in favour of Jimmy Savile. Doing that is meant to smear an opponent rather than engage with them or explain why they're wrong, or have to explain why they're wrong. You can just say that about them and then they get dismissed. Sure. That is corrosive for democracy, and it's, worst of all, from the government's perspective, it doesn't work. People see straight through it.
100%. And Theo Ushwood, the political commentator, mentioned earlier, when Boris Johnson talked about Keir Starmer representing Jimmy Savile, and Boris got into a lot of trouble over it, and Labour said that's an outrageous thing to bring Jimmy Savile into this. It's a new low for the Tories and all of this business. And here you've got a front bench minister of the Labour government doing exactly the same thing.
I hoped it had been a rush of blood to the head. I hoped he'd said it accidentally, because it's such an awful thing to say about somebody. Yeah. But that line is being repeated in their media lines today. It looks like this is a concerted attempt by the government, and it's a really bad idea.
Yeah, spot on. Listen, Alex, great to have you on again. We will speak again soon, I hope. Alex Dean, the political commentator, former Conservative candidate at the last election as well. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Martin says, I actually disagree with you on this one, Ian. I don't think Trump was telling Starmer how to win the next election. He was telling him what he is currently doing wrong, says Martin in Essex. Well, yeah, I mean, we're kind of a similar thing, really, I suppose, without being pedantic. I mean, he said at the beginning of that statement that we played, you know, it's really rather simple. And he outlined, you know, these are the mechanics and the things, the components that you need in place if you want success. One from Colin here. He says, a cabinet meeting on Gaza. What about a cabinet meeting on the state of the country? Never mind Gaza. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? There'd be a cabinet meeting. There'd be a Cobra meeting on the migrant hotel issue. That'd be a good start. Let's get one of those going. Let's get a whole... Look, we've seen this footage. It's not the first. It won't be the last. And we're going to see more of it because we've run out of the El Cheapo hotel. So now we're putting these people into slightly more opulent, a little bit plush in the hotel department. And that's going to be the shape of things to come. And the weather, although it's, you know, no longer 30 degrees as it was a couple of weeks ago, it's still all right. It's still okay. I don't know what the crossings are so far this week. We're on to Tuesday. We'll have a little look at those numbers and bring them to you as soon as we have it. But over the last week or so, 1,000 people a week or something like that in the last month or 6 weeks. I mean, even just saying it out loud. If you were an alien that had just arrived from another planet, legally, I should say, with correct visa and papers, and you were watching this go, 1,000 people a week just came into your country. Yeah, 1,000 a week. Well, why is that not front page news? We don't know why it's not front page news, because it darn well should be. Let's get a word from David in Coventry on Trump and Starmer. What have you got for us, David? Hello.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
You asked a question earlier, would Starmer take any notice of Trump's advice?
Yes.
There is not a snowflake in hell's chance of him taking any notice of any of this advice. He has a bunch of far-left Labour MPs behind him who make him seem positively conservative, who are just waiting to knife him in the back and replace him with their red-headed goddess, Red Ange, who would jump into his shoes in a nanosecond. And then with her incredibly superb intellect would do such a phenomenally good job.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure. I mean, it couldn't be anything other than that. But
yeah, well, you do wonder because, of course, she would be more of the Corbyn mould, and you know that would that bring Corbyn back into the party? Now he's running his own party. It was only 2 people in it, but is he likely to get back into bed with Angela Rayner, politically speaking?
Oh, quite possibly. It depends on how his new party goes. But he would probably initially say that we'll form a coalition partnership so that we can take on the dreadful reform people that just happen to represent the thoughts and opinions of probably 75 to 80% of the population of the country on all sorts of issues like trans, like tax, like especially immigration, because you can't bring literally tens of millions of people into a country over a short period of 30-odd years and without making any changes to the infrastructure to support them, without the system collapsing. And it is in process of collapsing at the moment.
Yeah, it really is.
The NHS to the police are falling apart. The police need a really good shake-up.
Yeah.
The police college needs to be done away with, the College of Policing, and let's go back to what they had before, and let's do what Nigel said last week, Monday, I think, on his press conference. Let's employ some of the former servicemen and women who we know have discipline, who know are patriotic, who know care about this country, and who will do the right thing, and they won't just police tweets. They'll actually go and police the streets.
That's what we need to see. David, great stuff. Thank you. David in Coventry on where we are at. Do you know the intro? Oh, by the way, the Channel migrant numbers, we had another 212 arrived yesterday. Channel arrivals for July. We've still got a few days left of July. 4,195. There you go. I said about 1,000 a week, so it's just over that. Migrant numbers for this year alone is 24,177. I mean, these are just jaw-dropping numbers. There's people that just turned up to our country. 24,177 people just arrived on boats. There you go. And plonked into hotels like the one that we've been showing you. This is... How is this not an emergency situation? How is this not a Cobra meeting moment for the government where you would go, hang on, no, we can't just keep doing this. We have nowhere to put these people. We know that this is not a case of assisting those that have escaped a war zone or some tyrannical regime where they were facing impending death if they hung around a day longer. That's not what we're dealing with here. These are people that found 2,000 or 3,000 quid in their back pocket to somehow make the journey over here and are now being put up in hotels, which is costing us, the taxpayer, a collective sum of about £7 million per day. Work that out over the course of a year. Think about what that would do for the big black hole that Labour keep talking about. That and other mad areas. The only bit that I question, having spoken, in fact, I don't question, this is the sort of thing that keeps me awake at night. When David just said then, you know, whether we're talking about the kind of woke, the trans issue, the gender madness and all that's enveloped this once great land of ours, immigration, ridiculous energy prices, etc. And David just said, this is stuff that 75% of the British public, you know, want addressed quickly. And I would share that. I would go, I just like to think it's probably more than that, maybe 85% of the British public. And then there's a bit of me, a like haunting, recurring dream, which is like, what if, are we wrong? What if it's not 75, 80%? What if it's like 20%? But we're all quite vocal about it in places such as this. And everyone else loves a bit of Starmer. This is kind of nightmare. This is beyond Scooby-Doo. This is more into kind of, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street territory of waking up with the cold sweats going, oh my God, actually my fellow countrymen have gone nuts. They don't believe this either. Is it just us? I mean, I don't, by the way, instinctively, I don't think it is. But you do wonder sometimes. I mean, if you went to a place like London, you look at Sadiq Khan, again, he was raised in the Trump press conference. How did that man get elected when you look at what the hell has gone on in London, whether it's you should be not elected on the fact that you've decided to plaster an entire city with cameras spying on citizens in cars and beyond, by the way. Facial recognition, goodness knows what. You know, that in itself would be like, sorry, mate, no, it's not China, it's not North Korea, fella. You're going. You're off. We're not going to vote for you. You'd think on that point. But you can bring in knife crime and things like that. Somehow he gets it. So in London, David's point about 75% probably wouldn't stand. But how does that divvy up? I mean, Labour did win an election. I know it was narrow and the share of the vote was slim and not as good as, oddly, Corbyn. Because there is an argument that some left-wingers make, and that is that, and this is curious, I can't remember who I first saw write this, that actually Jeremy Corbyn didn't lose the previous election that he stood for, 2019, whatever it was. He didn't lose it because he wasn't right-wing enough. He lost it because he wasn't left-wing enough. He should have been more left-wing. He'd have got more votes. Because the left believe the same as we do on the other side. Isn't that curious? 0344 499 1000. Rant over. Back with you coming next on Talk.
They have a political agenda that is not in the interest of this country.
Yeah.
It's costing the NHS billions. Doctor strikes, it's about the 12th strike we've had in about 2 years. It's cost about $1.5 billion. And if you look at what Rachel Reeves is doing with the economy, well, I mean, all of your listeners will know, Mike, we don't have that kind of money.
No.
It's not good for patient safety. People die during these strikes, operations delayed, people not getting the care that they need. And that's why I've said, right, enough, let's just ban these strikes and get doctors back to work. I said at the time, this bill is not going to work. I actually managed to get it watered down. The version we're seeing is the watered down version. It's very hard, you know, when you're in government. There are lots of people who want certain measures. We do need to do things to protect children from a lot of the harm that's online. But I could just see the way it was written, that as usual, it would go after people doing perfectly legitimate things, and the bad guys will still find a way to circumvent the rules. This is the story of our times.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's go back to it. Here's a comment from Ian, Ian's in Essex, who says, it's time Keir stopped hanging out with other leaders and stopped sorting out the world. And sort out the crock of nonsense he's got in this country. Get on TV, looks everybody in the eye and say from the heart, look, I get it and I will sort it out before Christmas or resign. Also, I think the protesters should start singing Welcome to the Hotel Keir Starmer. The words are perfect. That's Welcome to the Hotel Keir. It does work. Who'd have thought it? It does actually work. Let's go to Steve in Blackpool. How are you doing, Steve?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon to you. What are you thinking?
Keir Starmer, what do we do with him?
I know.
Obviously, I watched his interview yesterday.
Say again?
Comedy Gold. I watched his interview yesterday.
Yeah.
Comedy Gold. It should be on UK TV Gold because it's pure comedy.
100%.
But I said to your person that I rang up, I said he needs to watch that back with a parliamentary commission and answer what's he doing.
What is he doing?
Because he's obviously sat there and he's living through it, but he's not seeing what we're seeing.
Yep.
He's not seeing his facial expressions. He's not seeing Donald Trump, you know, world leader, as he is a world leader on our territory, looking like he needs a cone on his head with a D on it.
It's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit weird to watch. I mean, genuinely, when he was in the Oval Office with Starmer, with Trump, he didn't do too badly. I mean, there was that slightly weird moment when he pulled out the invitation from the King, but he kind of, you know, he did better than a lot of. I mean, the Irish leader got a bit of a pasting or a bit of an exposing over Irish businesses taking over American companies or something like that. But actually, yesterday, you're absolutely right, Steve. I mean, he looked like a little lost boy.
Yeah, he did. He looked like he'd had a scolding off his mum. He had to sit on his hands because he didn't know what else to do with them.
Yeah.
Honest, the only thing he admitted to, and I thought, why have you admitted to that, is being Sadiq Khan's mate. Who admits to that?
Well,
no.
So, Gavin, who? You'd keep it quiet, wouldn't you? You wouldn't tell anybody. Yeah, he's actually a mate of mine.
Yeah, you'd never admit that, and he admitted it to the entire world.
That's brilliant.
Why would you do that?
But the thing is, if that was the other way round, if Keir Starmer had said something derogatory about J.D. Vance or, you know, some other sort of well-known Republican, Starmer would have gone, hang on. Trump would have gone, no, you can't do that. Sorry, this is a really good guy. He'd have had a proper defence of him, but Keir just pops in, he's my friend. And it just...
Exactly.
He'd have been better saying nothing at all.
Exactly. The whole interview would have been better off saying nothing at all.
Yeah, well, in fact, as it turned out, he didn't say very much anyway, because in 90 minutes, I think Trump spoke for about 95% of it.
what a leader that man is. He's looking after his own country. And when he was on about the, how he won the election, I was half expecting to say, you only won because Conservatives were so bad.
Yes, that's right. That would
have been absolute genius.
That would have been a beauty, wouldn't it? Listen, Steve, I'm going to run to get more comments on, but you've been great. Thank you for that, Steve in Blackpool. Bruno is over there in Dundee. How you doing, Bruno?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. What are you thinking on this?
Yeah, with regards to the percentage of people you mentioned that care or do not care about what's going on.
Yes.
From my interaction with friends and family around Dundee, I would like to put it to you that the percentage of people that care is much lesser than you imagine.
He's much what?
Much more lower.
Right. So he's not got the kind of secret support that some people suggest.
No, I think he still has the support. Coming from Dundee, like what I see and how I interact with people here, it seems like they don't care. It's either it's still Labour because they're not ready to vote for reform or the Tories.
Do you sense... OK, do you sense, Bruno, that reform are gaining support?
Yes, but around here, like Scotland, it's Dundee, it still looks like they are indifferent towards what's going on. It looks like what's happening in the national level it doesn't affect them, so they're pretty much okay with, what they have now.
Yeah.
So most of the areas, they don't have like the migrant hotels, and it seems like it doesn't even bother them,
Right. So it's not an issue. It's interesting, isn't it? It becomes an issue when it kind of affects you. Bruno, thank you very much indeed for that. Clive in Solihull says, don't worry, Ian, it's not just us. If there was an election next week, the Labour Party would cease to exist in Parliament. I'm sick of the damage being done to the country by this useless government and their predecessors. I'm voting reform along with millions of others. There is a kind of a very die-hard contingent of Conservatives that would never, ever go to reform. I think it's a smaller number than it might have been, a year ago, maybe. Perhaps they're seeing the kind of shortcomings and difficulties with the Conservative Party. I think the Conservative Party is still, on a good day, I think the Conservative Party is still a very pure and ideal ideology and philosophy, politically speaking. I think it stands mostly. It's just not been implemented, and that's why people are crossing the line and going, well, instinctively I'm a Conservative, but nothing's happening there. I need something to happen. I need Kemi Badenoch to sound a bit like Nigel Farage. And although she's kind of got better, she's not the common touch. You can't learn that. I think I need to go in a room with Kemi and do a bit of media training. I've done a bit of this stuff in the past. Do a bit of media training. I don't want it to come out sounding like Dick Van Dyke or Danny Dyer, but just like somebody that you could engage with in the pub. You listen to how Nigel Farage speaks. He's not, Nigel's a very well-spoken guy. He speaks, nicely. He's privately educated. He's got a good background. But there's something within that. It's that kind of hidden part of someone's delivery that is just magnetic and the voice of the common man. And that's kind of the point. That's such a nugget to have. And if you haven't got it, in today's world, you're flipping lost. 0344 499 1000. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 3. We'll do more of your responses on text and comments there as well. If you want to leave a voice note, 0344 499 1000. More calls on the way too. Now, Keir Starmer holding an emergency cabinet meeting this afternoon to discuss Gaza in a rare gathering of his top team during the summer recess. As I said a moment ago, it shouldn't be a rare gathering that the British cabinet meet during a... How is there even a recess for a cabinet? For goodness sake, I mean, you know, take your holiday, I get all of that, not all at the same time, you know, scatter it, make a rota, Keir, so that everybody gets their time off and it doesn't clash. But that in itself is shocking. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this. Prime Minister wants to talk about options for delivering aid and steps needed to stop the fighting in Gaza. He's facing mounting pressure to recognise Palestine as a state, or recognise Palestine as a place, as a country, and give it statehood fully. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch told Talk this morning, she was here in the studio, this would be the wrong move. Here she is.
I think it would be the wrong thing to do at this point. There is a humanitarian crisis right now. That needs to be addressed. He should be talking about dropping aid packages, making sure that people there, you know, an international effort is being coordinated to look after the people who are suffering. There is a war on, and as you and I both know, and all your listeners will know, war is a terrible situation, and it means that there are many people who, through no fault of their own, are suffering. Let's see what we can do to help those people. But statehood gives Hamas power.
I would have thought that a 6-year-old could have worked that out, but hey, they roll differently over there at Labour HQ, it seems. Let's speak with Natasha Hausdorff, barrister, legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Natasha, nice to have you with us. I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I mean, we know what's going on. We know that there is this sort of momentum among some Labour members to get Palestine recognised as an official state, as a country, etc., whatever phrase you want to give to it. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, given that the recognition that was promised by Macron, by France, was welcomed immediately by Hamas as a positive step, certainly that ought to give Starmer and the Labour Party pause for thought. But the Leader of the Opposition, I think, has put it very diplomatically. The real problem with what is being toyed with this recognition of a state which simply does not exist, certainly doesn't exist under international law, is that it simply serves to encourage Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist groups and encourage intransigence. We've seen the impact on Hamas walking away from the negotiation table and the American proposed hostage release and ceasefire proposals. And we have seen the elongation, the prolongation of this conflict as a result of this very dangerous and unfounded rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, it's rather extraordinary to me. I was watching the 7/7 documentary that Netflix has shown, a sort of 4-part series, and looking, obviously it taps into the sort of Al-Qaeda ideology and what managed to have these young guys somehow enamoured by what was happening over there and wanting to replicate it. And as I was watching, I thought, well, this is Hamas. This is what they do. You know, this is what they believe and they think. And here we have, you know, international statesmen like Macron and, you know, potentially Keir Starmer, but certainly the sort of David Lammys of this world, that they want to legitimise that sort of ideology. And I don't know, I don't think I'm exaggerating or misrepresenting it, but that's precisely what they would be doing, right?
It was certainly what has been achieved so far and what would be continued by these sorts of proposals for recognition, but it won't change the state of play on the ground in any way. One cannot will a state into being. International law is very clear on the criteria for statehood: permanent population, defined territory, government, and capacity to enter into international relations. That's a matter of customary international law. It's also recorded in the Montevideo Convention. That much is settled. The Palestinians have never had a territory. Certainly, they do not have a defined territory now. Government also presents a significant issue when one considers the Hamas violent takeover in 2007 of the Gaza Strip. So we're not talking about even a single government across the territory that has been designated for a Palestinian autonomy not a state. And that's a really important clarification. It puts the lie to this term that's often deployed here, occupation. But also it highlights two very important points, very important repercussions that I've not heard anyone mentioning on this question of the United Kingdom supposedly recognising the so-called state of Palestine. The first is that this is ultimately an attack on Israeli sovereign territory. This is territory that has never changed its status since Israel's formation in 1948. It would such a recognition serve to supposedly legitimise Jordan's occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem between 1948 and 1967, and Egypt's occupation of Gaza between 1948 and 1967, when Israel recovered that territory. But it would also fly completely in the face of the Oslo Accords, which the United Kingdom endorsed, as did many other international players, which provided very clearly that after certain territory was given to the Palestinian Authority to have an autonomy given by Israel, that any change to borders or any change to the status of the territory would only arise from a bilateral negotiated final status settlement. That piece of paper that the UK endorsed is simply being torn up as a result of these proposals for recognition. And it leaves us with a very difficult position where Israel's not going to be in a position to trust any agreement it enters with international backing and international guarantees if it can be so readily thrown out of the window. So the repercussions of what is being discussed go far, far further than it seems these politicians have taken the time to educate themselves about.
If you were to sort of shift your barrister brain into the minds of those that do advocate for Palestine to be recognised as a state, that the Macrons, and I mentioned David Lammy, I don't think he's ever come out with it, but you kind of know, those kind of voices, they would naturally say, no, of course we don't support Hamas. What do you think their thinking is, by their logic, they are trying to achieve by this?
Well, it seems to me that they have been very badly misled indeed, both by the international media coverage over the last 21 months, but also the rewriting of history. Many of these people seem to think that there was once a Palestine which was taken away from people and that this land has been occupied by Israel. And that is simply incorrect, both on the historical and the legal analysis. Even the notion of Palestinian national identity is something of a more recent creation. It exists, and the Palestinians have self-determination, they have autonomy, they have self-governance. We've unfortunately seen the devastating consequences of that under Hamas in Gaza, and increasingly we see Hamas threatening a takeover of the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority as well. So I think their good intentions, no doubt, have been thoroughly misdirected by the misinformation, the false information and the false narratives that have been projected. I mean, I'm sitting here in front of you, the granddaughter of Palestinians. You know, that might strike people as somewhat odd, but before the creation of the State of Israel, there was no such thing as exclusively Arab Palestinian national identity. It applied to all the people living in that territory. And as Israel was the only state to emerge from that mandate, the consensus that there has been some sort of change in the borders, and I've heard many people, politicians now, also referring to this misnomer of 1967 borders. Let me be clear. There's no such thing. The lines that are being referred to are not borders, and they refer to the armistice lines of 1948, the lines at which the relevant armies basically agreed to stop during the first attempted war of annihilation against Israel in 1948. So there is so much to unpack here in terms of the misinformation of the history, but that's ultimately, I think, what is leading these well-intentioned people into this very dangerous path. The effects of what they are calling for cannot be denied. That is why Hamas has welcomed recognition by France. It is seeking, at this stage, simply to survive and to drag on this conflict in Gaza as long as possible. That is costing lives, Palestinian lives and Israeli lives, and the lives of the hostages that are still alive and being kept in terror tunnels by Hamas are very much in the balance. So they may be well-intentioned, but they are doing a great deal of damage, including to the Palestinian civilians that they purport to support.
What does your sort of legal gut tell you on this? I mean, Keir Starmer, I would imagine, half an hour ago when he was, doing what you do for a living, but in a different strand of the law, he was a human rights barrister. He, undoubtedly would have supported the idea of recognising Palestine as its own place, its own country, etc. He has to play a very different game as Prime Minister. Personally, I can't imagine him quite putting his name to this. I might be wrong. Where do you see this coming down on? What do you think, what will an announcement look like after this Cobra meeting with the Cabinet?
Well, Keir Starmer has most recently been consistent in saying that any recognition would have to be as part of a process. But the fact of the matter is that if a lawyer is looking at these issues, then there has to be a recognition of how international law properly applies here, what the status of this territory is. And we have to do away with these political terms of occupation included, which are not reflective of what the legal status of the territory is. I have to, be frank that the recognition of states and the creation of states in international law is sometimes a debated area. There are different schools of thought on this, but what generally international lawyers agree on are the required elements that I mentioned under the Montevideo Convention, which the Palestinians simply do not meet. You cannot will a state into existence, and it's important to state that Keir Starmer is wrong. Absolutely wrong on the international law when he talks about a supposed inalienable right of the Palestinians to a state. There is no such thing. If there was a right to statehood under international law, the Kurds would have a state. There'd be many hundreds more states. In fact, what international law prizes far higher is territorial integrity of existing states. That's how international law works. So both on the facts, the law, the politics, and in encouraging internationally prescribed terrorist organisations with these political antics and dangerous rhetorics, I'm afraid the Prime Minister would be wrong on every count.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what comes of this. Maybe there's a kicking into the long grass, which seems to be the usual political manoeuvre at these times, and sort of wearing both hats. Maybe it will be that. Natasha, great to have you on. Let's speak again. Thank you for being with us. Natasha Horsdorf, Legal Director at UK Lawyers for Israel, a very senior barrister in this area, and very thorough on her history. What is always fascinating listening to somebody like Natasha, you absolutely know you would find round the corner and I've done this many times, these debates, where you then get a lawyer on from the other side of this argument who will also throw at you all sorts of dates and alignments and accords and laws and diktats from decades and decades ago, but have a very different view. Your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Graham's in High Wycombe on this point. Graham, what do you make of this? Hi.
Hi, I think that recognising Palestine would be possibly the most disgraceful and egregious thing that Keir Starmer could do as Prime Minister. It's essentially a reward for terrorism. It's a reward for the attempted genocide of Israelis on October the 7th. And it's a complete farce. What would be the capital of Palestine? What would its currency be? What administrative government buildings would it have? The answer to all of those questions is none. It's a token gesture, and it proves to me that anti-Semitism is still festering within the Labour Party long after the virus of Jeremy Corbyn is gone.
It does feel like that, doesn't it? It does feel that those kind of little tentacles of that sort of entrenched anti-Semitic, very left-wing position is still there. It's lying underneath a lot of what this government and their front bench are doing.
Absolutely. I mean, why are we rewarding Hamas? And they are the government of obviously of Palestine in some manner of speaking.
In the loosest sense.
Why are we rewarding them when they've spent when they've spent billions of dollars of aid money that should have gone to their own people to build terror tunnels longer than the New York subway and London Underground, and they've stolen this aid money from their people? Why are we rewarding them when they obey no international law, both domestically and in the conduct of war? It's beyond obscene. It's vile.
It's vile indeed. Graham, thank you very much indeed. I think you lay it out brilliantly. Unarguable, I would contend, points, but obviously there are very strong views that say the opposite to that. More calls from you on the way. Some great messages coming in as well. 0344 499 1000. Day 5 of The Voice of Doom. That's coming next on Talk.
well as solar and all the rest of it. But we need to get serious about this because the technologies of the future, if we're going to hope to compete, when you go on your ChatGPT or your Grok or something, or even Google and look something up now, you're using huge amounts of energy for the great big data centers that artificial intelligence require. And we are going to get left in the dirt unless we get real on this. The answer, in my humble opinion, is to get real about nuclear energy. It's why the French are so much better than us on this respect only.
They have a political agenda that is not in the interest of this country. Yeah. It's costing the NHS billions. Doctor strikes, it's about the 12th strike we've had in about 2 years. It's cost about $1.5 billion. And if you look at what Rachel Reeves is doing with the economy, well, I mean, all of your listeners will know, Mike, we don't have that kind of money. No. It's not good for patient safety. People die during these strikes, operations delayed, people not getting the care that they need. And that's why I've said, right, enough, let's just ban these strikes and get doctors back to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Just before we do the Voice of Doom, this in from Becky says, another great show. Listening to Alex Dean, I'm speechless. He would describe Starmer as being strong internationally, but how? Looking at what he's achieved so far, the migrant pact with France that gives us a net reduction of migration of 0, hugely increased numbers of illegals, not irregular migrants, giving away the Chagos Islands, handing Gibraltar border to Spain, setting up the worthless coalition of the willing, which is as much use as a chocolate teapot, and just a nice little backslapping jolly for all the people involved every time they meet up, telling us we won't be going back into Europe as Brexit was a democratic referendum, and making sure that there won't be any freedom of movement, and then capitulating on all of that, putting the political muppet Lammy into the position of Foreign Secretary. Doesn't seem he's very strong on the international front to me. And personally, I actually think dinner with Trump would be fascinating. Like many, I like many things he does and not some of the others. But on the whole, he's much better than the Democrats and still fascinating to hear. Yeah, it's kind of spot on that, Becky. You'd love to be at a dinner party with Donald Trump. They'd be hilarious, if nothing else. Maybe a bit frightening as well. Don't go away, Paul in Newport. Voice of Doom. This is the mystery voice bit. It's a political figure you are looking for. Here's the question. Who is this?
I certainly have things to say.
It's day 5 of this one. It's not Ian Duncan Smith. People keep guessing in. It's not him. You've got to go way back on this one. So don't think contemporary too much. Here it is again.
I certainly have things to say.
If you think you know, 87222, and hopefully we will get, says with some level, no level of confidence at all. Will we get a right answer on that? I know I've said this before, but we've had some real stinkers that you think no one's going to know that, and they've gone on day 1. This is day 5 of this voice. If you think you know who this is...
I certainly have things to say.
87222. If we have a correct answer, all will be revealed after the news. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. Back on the phones with you. Paul is in Newport. How are you doing, Paul?
Oh, I'm not so bad, my friend. Not well up to my neck in my industrial boiler at the minute, but that's a different story.
That's a different. That's all right.
Just the sort of like the Israel sort of Palestine thing, like I'd encourage everyone to do a bit of research. Okay, this is, and I've just done a bit. Not recently, but since it's been coming on. It's really, really complex. I mean, really, really complex. Sure. I mean, put in someone like David Lammy, you'll forget that. I mean, the guy's it's beyond him, absolutely beyond him. Bear in mind, this issue's been going for over 75 years. And when you dig into it, I mean, both sides have had opportunities to bring it to a conclusion. Both sides have chosen not to. All this sort of stuff. I mean, I think in 48, after the Second World War, when everyone sort of said, hey, the Jewish people have a real tough ride. We're going to give them this land. I think it was about 600,000 of them at the time. There's like 2.2 million Palestinians now. And we're sort of, it seems to be they can't have anywhere. So when you look at it, it's not cut and dried, my friend. And I'm not saying I'm not siding on either side. I'm just an Englishman.
Yeah.
Who, when I hear something, I don't always listen to what's on the radio. I go and do a bit of research for my good self.
Which is fair enough. That's how it should be, right?
Yeah, but well, I mean, most sensible people, let's face it, we don't always believe what we're heard or what we're told, do we? You'd be mad to in the current world. But when you do a bit of digging, it's really, really complex. I just think I'm not convinced it's right for us, me included. We tend to jump in, and we put our 2 pence in, and we're not always aware of what's behind it. I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. I'm really, really not. But I would bet my last penny on it that most people don't really understand where it stems from. And the more you dig into it, the more you realise that both sides have walked away from an opportunity. Right? They really, really have. I'm not going to go into any more than that. Okay. The more you read, the more you'll understand. But I honestly think this is an intractable problem. I don't think there's a solution.
And it has been intractable for decades, of course. As you rightly say, it doesn't look like there's any easy solution, if nothing else. Paul, great point. Thank you very much indeed for that. Paul in Newport. Chris is in Epsom. Fire away, Chris. What have you got for us?
Oh, you always put me on right before the news in.
That's all right. You can do it, Chris.
No, you can have me back afterwards. Starmer and Macron, right? Short-term thinking, this idea of recognising Palestine as a state is an absolute joke, right? All it is to give them some sort of air of authority that they believe they get from the international playing field. And also, it helps them because they both got us in trouble with the Muslim votes, right, in both countries. So it helps address that problem. But can you honestly imagine, if they recognise that as a state, how many years of problems is that going to cause continuing, because Hamas has not been finished?
Yeah.
Until they're finished, you can't even think about that. Now, also, what's slid under the door at the moment with everything that's going on is Macron has completely stitched us and Starmer up, because the judiciary in France have just repealed their refugee law, and they've opened the door to all 2 million Palestinian refugees. Now, when they get to France, do you think they're going to stay in a tent or they're going to come to us?
Well, there you go. On that point, Chris, you rightly identified we were just hot on the tail of the news there, but what a profound point to finish on. You want to respond to Chris on that? 2 million refugees potentially going over there to France. What's their next port of call after that? Thank you to Chris. Over to you for more comments shortly. 0344 499 1000. Are we going to solve on day 5 the voice of doom? This is The Voice.
I certainly have things to say.
Think you know who that is? 87222. Hopefully we'll find out on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock right here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Afternoon Empire. Welcome back. 3 minutes, or coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock right here on Talk. We are talking about Donald Trump warning Prime Minister, schooling Prime Minister Keir Starmer on how to win an election, slash taxes, sort out migration and sort your energy bills out. If you want to defeat Nigel Farage, you've got to go into that direction. He says Labour's record on high taxes and ruinous immigration levels are driving voters straight to Reform UK. Mr Trump is right, but will Keir Starmer take his advice and act? More on that from you in a few moments. Also this afternoon, Southport observing a 3-minute silence today to mark the first anniversary of those tragic murders of 3 young girls, with the community focusing on rebuilding through legacy gardens and a new playground in their memory. We'll look at that, obviously, in a few moments. And renting costs in Britain have hit record highs, with average monthly rents now over 400 quid higher than they were just 5 years ago. But conditions could soon improve for tenants. What is behind that story? Our man with his ear to the ground on all matters landlord and rental based is Paul Champlina. He's with us later in the show. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Right, should we do the Voice of Doom? Have we got a winner on the Voice of Doom? We've played this voice for 5 days now. No one so far has got it correct. Have another listen.
I certainly have things to say.
I certainly have things to say. Who is that? These are some of the guesses. Peter Bottomley, no. Anthony Eden, no. Norman Tebbit, no. Stephen Byers, no. Stephen Byers a few weeks ago. Francis Pym, no. William Hague, it is not. Robert Mugabe, it is not. David Steele, no. Cecil Parkinson, no. I get the ballpark you're in with that. Similarly, Alan Clark was another big guess. That's also a no. But you are in the... Well, no, you're not. You're thinking of older, perhaps, characters from the political spectrum. But I have to say, I said it earlier, I hadn't even heard of this person. And I know who it is now. So it's tricky. It's back tomorrow, same time, and hopefully we do find a winner. As I mentioned a moment ago, Southport observing a 3-minute silence today to mark the first anniversary of the murders of 3 young girls at that local dance class. The attack also left 8 others injured, 2 adults injured, and a legacy of absolute horror that clearly that community and those around, family, friends, will struggle with for many, many years, if not forever. The community focusing on trying to rebuild with plans for legacy gardens and a new playground, which will be in the memory of the victims. Let's speak to the writer and commentator Charlie Bentley Astor on this point. Afternoon to you, Charlie. I think I'd speak for everybody when I say this is one of the most... You know, when this story broke a year ago, we were on it. I mean, it was just... I don't even know how to describe the horror, frankly. Everything about the setting, how it happened, the age of the victims, the curious, whatever the motivation was of the perpetrator. Just one of the most horrific triple murders, and of children, we have ever seen.
As you say, there are no words to describe what happened. It's kind of not the job of the public to do so. It's for the families to articulate what matters to them, particularly in the aftermath. And all of them have established charities in the name of their children, and each have found their own way to either live with or overcome their difficulties. What it is, though, is the duty of the nation to find out what went wrong and how we stop an attack like this ever happening again against our children.
Whenever there is an attack, and this one is, look, I don't want to get too much and start naming the perpetrator of this horrendous act, but of course the question that comes up that's always raised, which I find infuriating in many respects. You know, lessons will be learned, and I don't know whether it's ever possible to learn lessons if there is a mad person on the loose of whatever background or ideology or wherever they come from. I don't know whether the human gene pool is ever capable of mustering the wisdom or the knowledge to ever fully eradicate that. Do we just live with the idea that terrible people will always live among us, or is there a kind of a route that we can at least attempt to stop this?
I mean, you're right, Ian, in that psychopathy does exist and persist within the population at 1% and sociopathy at 5%, but it doesn't mean that we're powerless to do anything. At least within the case of the perpetrator of the Southport massacre, he came across every kind of support service that existed for teenagers, young people and adults to apprehend, control, contain him. And as we're discovering at every single juncture, it wasn't that he was simply overlooked, as the government are trying to lay out. It seems that he was intentionally dismissed again and again and again in a way that cannot be understood or forgiven.
And again, you know, we can talk about the Prevent programme. You know, he slid off the radar. There was all sorts of flags that were kind of raised, and concerns through schooling. We know this person had an absolute fascination with horrific violent acts, with a particular focus on school shootings and things like that. He dabbled into the sort of almost the Al-Qaeda territory with stuff that he downloaded on his computer. We spoke to somebody fairly recently on this kind of area of where people sit on the spectrum. Some have a very specific religious reason behind the horrors that they carry out. For others, it is a level of anger because of something that happened to them personally. It could be something as relatively minor as they've been dumped by a partner and out they went. And then there's another group where it's just about sheer violence. And perhaps you mentioned psychopathy there, which is true. Maybe we never solve that, and these like oddballs of whatever age and in whatever form will just be there forever, and our job is to just try and find ourselves to be as secure as we can forever.
Well, I don't think so. I think certainly being able to completely isolate ourselves from these people isn't ideal.
Yeah.
But there are more things that we can do, and that's why the Southport independent inquiry has been launched into this, because there are so many obvious failings. The government, after the trial of the perpetrator, looked at revising the definition of terrorism to accommodate this, what appears to be a new style of attack, people who aren't motivated explicitly by one individual ideology or one individual instance that galvanizes their ferocity. It's people who are seeded with ideas again and again and again until it becomes a fixation, an obsession that they need to satiate. And so, at least in the case of the Southport killer, the police are still, at least what is known and in the public domain, are still unsure about precisely what motivated him and why he went to that specific dance class. To some extent, it seems like a random act, in that he was scrolling through Instagram and likely came across an advert for this dance class. And to some extent, this is all the more horrifying, both for the victims, their families, but also the wider public, that this could be anybody at anything at any time, and there's nowhere that you can take your children and guarantee that they'll be safe. The poor dance teachers have castigated themselves again and again and again and again for leaving the door of the dance studio open, despite it being the middle of summer, blazing hot. And now we're in the position where we have to decide whether we can have the breeze on our children's faces or risk them being murdered. And yet, in this being random, there is some peace in that these children were not targeted specifically for them, their personalities, their individuality, who they are. They were just bloody unfortunate to be in that situation, and the parents could not have known, the dance teachers could not have known. And so it's a double-edged sword about how we tackle this, but certainly not ignoring the red flags that are there time and time again would be a starting point.
You'd think so. I was reading something this morning where I think, I don't know whether it was Prevent or some other organisation or establishment that had, there was even somebody they stumbled across who was hoping to replicate what had happened in Southport. So this kind of criminal mind, and you are forced to wonder, you know, what did criminal minds or angry, violent minds do before social media and the like, or the ability to be able to see or replicate or copycat? You know, is that, am I simplifying it by even raising that, or is there a correlation between the kind of world we now live in and the sort of attacks people will carry out? Maybe previously somebody might have stood on the top of a building with a gun to their head and jumped off it, I don't know, in order to, you know, illuminate to the world how angry they were with everything. Now we see these kind of attacks, which are sort of designed almost to create maximum impact. You know, a kids' dance school, that backdrop of little innocent under 10s attending, for goodness sake, you know, a Taylor Swift themed dance. I mean, it doesn't get any more troubling and heartbreaking when you think of just the sheer backdrop of innocence that was at play here, and then this came along. Is it the world we now live in, I wonder, Charlie? I know we're sort of veering into other territory here, but it's nonetheless interesting, that is promoting these kind of attacks. Do people fuel their anger by what they see online?
Well, at least in this instance, some of the parents of victims have come forward and sort of agreed with the government that there needs to be a greater analysis of the kind of online content that is available for children. Now, obviously, we've seen this new online safety bill come in the last few days that's proving to be quite controversial, not least because young people tend to have the wits to get around it more than the adults who have put it in place. But nevertheless, it's true, even if you think back to sort of 10, 15 years ago, you didn't see this kind of violent content almost never in your life. You might see a still picture on the front of a newspaper, or some of the worst stuff. You'd have BBC News going, for those who are sort of sensitive, look away now. And even then, it wouldn't be the worst kind of the violence that you're seeing online every single day. And what's more is that with AI and things taken in small snippets, you don't know the full context, and so someone can get very wound up or distressed or vindictive or contemptuous over something that isn't even true. And so not only are we dealing with those influences, like in Rudy Kobana's case, genocides and mass shootings, partly inspired by his parents' background in the Rwandan genocide. You've also got all kinds of sort of sadomasochistic violence, sexual violence, taken out of context and sort of idolized as an empowering act, something that can give particularly young men who undeniably have been feeling robbed of place and purpose an outlet. If they can't be useful, they will be remembered some other way. And whilst I actually don't think that's applicable in the case of the Southport killer, it is nevertheless something to be looked at, the vulnerability of young men, and that they are at a juncture in their teenage years where they can either be used for good or used for bad, and there's no support in place or even a willingness to concede or understand this. That means that we can begin to get ahead of these attacks before these people even become extremists.
Indeed. Charlie, thank you. It's always a delicate and tricky subject to talk around on this one, but thank you to Charlie Bentley Astor on this. And the radicalisation, it's almost easier to understand. I keep I've said this a couple of times now about watching the 7/7 documentary that is on Netflix, and it is worth a look because there's quite a bit in there you've probably forgotten. I'd certainly forgotten that the 7/7, one of the people that came forward that helped kind of assist the 7/7 bombers was one of the bombers' brothers, who found some detail on his brother's phone and told the police. And also in the a week later after the 7/7 bombings, or 2 weeks later, there was another set of 4 bombings that failed, thank goodness. And a manhunt was on for those 4 guys. And the father of one of those guys was the person that called the police and said, "That is my son." Because by that stage they'd had the sort of imagery of it. And you look at what radicalises them, and certainly in the 7/7 case, these were mostly intelligent people, which if you've ever read or watched anything about suicide bombers, they are invariably, usually things we've seen happen in the Middle East, and not in this is the first time we'd seen it on British, possibly even European soil, I think, suicide bombings. But one of the correlations of suicide bombers has been that they are usually fairly smart people from professional backgrounds of some sort. They're not, some wayward bloke sitting in a bedsit somewhere in his underpants just getting radicalised by... they usually come from the professional classes, which, go figure. You kind of scratch your head and go, well, that makes it even more mysterious in one way. And I think that was pretty much the case with the 7/7 bombers. I think one was a school teacher or certainly a teaching assistant of some kind. But you look at it and think, wow, you were radicalised through your faith and through what was happening, and you went on training grounds and all the rest of it. But you can sort of, as horrific and deranged as all this stuff is, you can kind of sort of see what a terrorist is thinking, even if, well, you'd hope any sane, decent person would fundamentally disagree. But their line of logic is not hard to follow, whether it's the IRA, Al-Qaeda, whoever it happens to be. With the random violent acts of individuals, and of course, I should add that the terrorist element of things has gone on for hundreds of years. That predates the digital world and social media. The violent attacks, the school shootings, which again, I don't like Mondays, you can go back to the 70s, and probably a little bit before that. But broadly speaking, what role does the digital age play in those that aren't actually wedded to a particular ideology or a particular faith or anything? There's just a sort of a seed of real anger. And then it's kind of grown and grown by watching all of the wrong material and going into chat rooms where people have similar views and perhaps others saying, go on, I dare you, do this, etc. We see that quite a lot of people who aren't specifically linked to a certain ideology, whether it's religious, political or otherwise. And that is kind of, the big question about the world we live in. Does the online safety bill address this? Of course it doesn't address this. Not in a million years. If you're a nut job, you're not going to worry about an online safety bill and some sort of ID that's required to look at a certain website. You'll find your way around it like that. 0344 499 1000. More. I want some comment on that if you've got some views on that too. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
as well as solar and all the rest of it. But we need to get serious about this because the technologies of the future, if we're going to hope to compete, when you go on your ChatGPT or your Grok or something, or even Google and look something up now, you're using huge amounts of energy for the great big data centers that artificial intelligence require. And we are going to get left in the dirt unless we get real on this. The answer, in my humble opinion, is to get real about nuclear energy. It's why the French are so much better than us on this respect only.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, yes. Welcome back to the home of Common Sense. Chris in Northumberland says, had we not had such widespread closures of mental health hospitals and a drive to care in the community, we would have had more options to manage the killer of those girls beforehand. We've lost a lot of tools and resources we used to have in our toolbox. Most people can be managed in the community, but there are individuals we need inpatient services to manage. It's a difficult balance. Although, you know, that was originally kind of back in the sort of early 80s, wasn't it, that the care in the community became a thing, and I understood the thinking behind it. It was just fatally flawed. I mean, literally fatally flawed in so many respects. But that's like 40 years ago. We still haven't got a full handle on this thing. Let's go to Billy in Belfast on a separate point of Starmer and what's going on with immigration. Billy, what have you got for us?
All right, Ian, how you doing? Ian, I've listened to this for weeks, mate. This keeps going on, and nobody mentions the big elephant in the room here.
Go on.
And yes, everybody's going to jump on this, that this is all conspiracy theory, etc., etc. Okay, step back and look at the bigger picture. Keir Starmer is not a stupid man, right? That's the first thing. Yeah. Keir Starmer knows exactly what Keir Starmer is doing. This is all to do with the WEF, the WHO. Keir Starmer was asked in an interview, where would you rather be, Davos or Westminster? Yeah. And straight away, no ifs or buts, Davos.
I think he was trying to be cool. I think he was trying to say, oh, they're all boring at Westminster. I don't think he knew what the hell Davos was, to be honest.
No, mate. No, you see, if you actually look back, you connect the dots, and again, people are going to jump all over this. Oh, conspiracy theories. It's not. If you actually connect the dots, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, they were all what you would call disciples or whatever of George Soros. And this is the whole plan. Ian,
I don't think Keir Starmer is a disciple of George Soros.
Yes, he was. He was. If you actually go and check
when was that?
He was. Whenever he was coming up through the judiciary, he was.
He was a disciple of George Soros. I mean, I don't know how their paths would have crossed in that respect.
He follows all into the whole socialist agenda, etc. Destroy societies from within.
So you think when Keir Starmer wakes up in the morning when no one's listening, his motivation is to destroy the society?
Absolutely. UN Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030. Go and read about it.
Well, yes, I know you can read a lot online, but I mean, how much of that is true? I mean, there's I saw a United Nations doctrine quite recently doing the round. I think it had about 27 million likes and shares of a document that talked about a one world government, XYZ. And there's simply no evidence that this document existed.
Oh, no, Ian, no, this is the whole point, mate. There's no evidence. It's the same thing come up with the pandemic. There was no evidence to back all this up, and it's all coming out now.
When you say that, right, okay, well, let's not get into the pandemic because we could talk about that for half an hour. I get it. But what I'm asking is what you're basing it on, Billy.
Just reading about it, Ian. Just reading about it, connecting the dots across it. Keir Starmer knows what he's doing. He is not a stupid man. He is doing this for a reason.
But this is not, this predates, some of this predates Keir Starmer, of course, because previous governments have done some of things.
This goes right back to David Cameron. Even this new, what do you call it, the new security laws they've just brought in with regards to the internet, that goes right back to David Cameron in 2013. So it does, when that initially was all set up.
Well, I didn't know it went back to David Cameron, but whoever it goes back to.
It goes back to David Cameron.
But, so you think that is about silencing speech? Or
it's all about silencing speech. The Brit card that's coming in, right? It's all digital ID, shut you down, your digital banking. It's all about controlling, and this is what it's all about, man.
Do you know Borg Brent?
People are going to jump all up. Sorry?
Do you know Borg Brent?
I've heard of him, yes.
Do you know who he is?
Yes, I have. No, not off the top of my head. I have heard of him.
He's the president of the World Economic Forum, which I thought you might know, Billy, bearing in mind of what you're saying. Now, he, along with, and I can't think of the other guy, Peter somebody or other, who I think is the chairman or whatever. I mean, these guys...
Borg Brent has just taken over because George Soros was the president. George... Actually, his son is now taking over as well.
Yeah. Are you not confusing it with Klaus Schwab?
Yes, I am. Sorry, correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's quite a confusion, bearing in mind the context of what we're talking about.
Sorry, go ahead.
So Starmer it was Klaus Schwab that Starmer was hanging around with, not George Soros.
Klaus Schwab, yes, George Soros.
Right.
My apologies.
Okay, that's fine. I was just wondering where Klaus Schwab and Starmer would have met then, back then.
Yeah. But I mean, George Soros backs up a whole lot of this stuff. Bill Gates and China are in control of the WHO.
They're in charge of it.
Yes.
Yeah, but what I'm asking you is, I'm not asking you what your sources are, because that would be impolite. But what has led you to that belief?
You go online, you'll read about it. Explains it exactly. We've just signed up to the WHA, as it's called, 78.1.
So
we've given total control to the WHO. They can call when we have lockdowns.
No, that isn't true. They are allowed to. And they are allowed to advise on it. They're not allowed to call it.
And do you think Keir Starmer or a Labour government, etc., won't take that?
Well, they may not. I don't know. I don't want to test it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I would bank money on it.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll have to. Let's hope we don't have to have another lockdown to find out.
Yeah.
Do you sense there's one on the way, Billy?
This one what?
Lockdown.
No, I'm saying the WHO can call a lockdown with this WHA 78.1, which you've just brought into effect.
Well, most countries...
We have given the control.
Yeah.
We have given the control.
We gave control. We didn't give control. We agreed to the idea that they could advise countries.
Yeah, and I mean, Keir Starmer took from the ICJ about Chagos. It was an opinion. And, of course, he went straight down that road.
There it is, Billy. It's food for thought. Thank you very much indeed. We'll continue to ponder on some of that. Let's go to Fee in Berkshire. Fee, who's running the world? Sorry, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Ian.
Hiya.
Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Firstly, my heartfelt condolences to all those remembering Southport today. And I just want to say sorry for all of that. But I'd like to talk about the proposal for recognising Palestine as a state from Macron and now Starmer getting in on it.
Yeah.
My question is, what will it actually achieve? Will it achieve peace in the Middle East? Guaranteed peace in the Middle East? I believe that a two-state solution has been offered 5 times to the PLO, to the PA and to Hamas, and each time it's been rejected. So does that not make people think why? Why are they rejecting it? Yep. Is it because they don't want peace? Is it because the ideology to destroy Israel and the Jews off the face of the planet is their ideology? Why haven't they accepted it before? They've had plenty of opportunities. And since Hamas took over in 2006, there's been absolutely no will to achieve any peace, in my opinion.
Well, there doesn't seem to be any, does there? And I do wonder about that. It's a really good question for you, and I did try to put that to our barrister. What, if she could put her mind in the mind of a barrister who was representing Hamas, what would they say was, or even the mind of Emmanuel Macron or David Lammy or whoever?
Yeah.
What would their, I can't imagine. David Lammy might be a bit of a wet and a bit rubbish, but I don't imagine he wants a terrorist organisation running anything if you put it to him like that. So he must have another reason why he would think, or people like him might think, that Palestine should be recognised as a state, even though that state will be run by a terrorist organisation.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the whole main reasons to not even propose it or
100%. 100%. I mean, how can anybody not see their way around that point?
I know. And secondly, I mean, it's not our business at the end of the day. Macron should keep out of it. Starmer should keep out of it.
Yeah.
It's the Middle East. This is a centuries-old issue. Israelis were on the land over 4,000 years ago, long before any Palestinians were there, and there's historic evidence of that as well. And if people just did a bit of research and looked at the history and understood a bit more about what has been offered in the past, then they might have a bit more of an understanding as to why this won't be a long-term permanent solution to peace. Jordan hasn't opened its borders. Egypt hasn't opened its borders. So why aren't they helping the refugees as well?
It's kind of weird, that, isn't it? Isn't that really strange? You've got this one country, tiny Israel.
Smaller than Earth.
Yeah, indeed, a pinprick on the wider Middle East map. And all these other countries who share far more, certainly most of them, I'd like to think don't all share terrorist intent. Some do, of course, but where are they on the humanitarian aid? How has it fallen to us and France and America or something to provide bags of rice when there are countries that literally are on the border with these places? Egypt being the obvious one.
Exactly, which, let's face it, the GN and the UN are not doing a good job of distributing the thousands and thousands of tons that is stored in Gaza at the moment, because they're not doing their job. Yet all of this just feeds the Hamas propaganda machine, which is exactly what they want, which is why we've now got 2 European politicians discussing the potential of a Palestine state, which is nothing to do with us.
100%, Fee. It's a great call, and I share your confusion on this one as well. Thank you. Fee in Berkshire. We're going to change gear in a few moments. We'll talk rental prices through the roof, but apparently there's good news for renters around the corner. The man who regularly helps us out with these kind of stories is Paul Champliner. He's with us next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's look at this story then. This, of course, is the world of property and all that goes with it, particularly if you're renting, if you're in that ballpark of, a landlord, if you're in an area where you're considering legging it from mum and dad, etc., or you're deciding that you want to, sit on your money for a little bit and see how it pans out. It never goes away. It's a kind of all-encompassing, never-ending issue around the world of rental, property purchasing. If you're a landlord, if that is your area, your industry, it's a live wire story that now makes front pages where once upon a time it just made property pages in smaller magazines. It's huge. The controversy of where you live. The cost of renting in Britain has reached record highs. The average monthly rent is now more than 400 quid higher than it was 5 years ago. So looking outside of London, the capital, rents have hit a new peak of an average of £1,365 per month, while in London the average is £2,712. So you've got to be earning well over 30 grand a year just to pay your rent if you want to live in the capital. However, the pace of rent increases is apparently slowing, suggesting conditions may soon improve for tenants. But by how much? Let's speak with Paul Champlina, founder of Landlord Action, who regularly helps us out on these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Paul. And I guess, look, these numbers, you've been on this show many, many times. We've crunched the numbers, we've talked about them, the issue surrounding a lack of availability as well as the high rents, etc. I mean, it's an absolute mess out there at the moment, and it's apparently going to get a little bit better, but only a bit.
Well, I think you summarised it really well. Actually, I've seen the rip-off. It says tenants ripped off as average rents soar. I mean, look, the rents have gone right up. Look, affordability is a big issue with regard to tenants, without a doubt, the cost of living crisis. But rents have levelled off, so that's good news for renters. But if you say about those numbers, I mean, excluding London, the average rent is £1,365. It used to be under £1,000 2-3 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it's gone up, like you said, over £400 a month, which is a big sharp rise of 4%. The good news for tenants is that about a quarter of rental properties, 25% of rental properties, now tenants are giving bids and there are rental reductions. So landlords are taking lesser bids. But of course, there's a big whole massive change in our industry, and we talk about this a lot when I see you at the shows as well, Ian. It's obviously the Renters' Rights Bill that's coming in, which is going to have massive changes on the industry with regard to periodic tenancies, not longer tenancies, the abolishment of Section 21. There's been lots of uncertainty, and by that uncertainty, let me just give you these numbers. There was 451,000 sales instructions, of which 70,000 of those were formal rental. So what does that mean? It means landlords have been selling up. We talked about this loads of times, more so the smaller landlords. And what does that mean? It means that some landlords may not have put the rent up for some years, because they wanted a good tenant and they cared about the tenant, wanted to stay in the property. And then all of a sudden they think, you know what, I'm getting out because of all loads of different reasons, mortgage costs, tax costs, all that stuff. And then, of course, the good tenant, because let's face it, 95% of tenants out there are really good tenants, look after property, pay on time, then they're going to be told to leave. So what I do think will happen is when the legislation comes out and it's now going to be going to ping pong and there's conference season. So Labour need to announce in their manifesto at conference that we've brought this Renters' Rights Bill in because, of course, it was right at the top of their manifesto, especially for renters, of course, of renters' votes, is that we've now brought in the abolishment and the abolishment of the Section 21, which means you can't just serve a 2-month notice. What will happen is when that announcement is made, I can see more landlords trying to beat the ban, most probably. But it's actually a side-eyed complimentary piece to say actually rents are levelling out, even though the headline says it's gone up to 1365.
So levelling out is one thing, but of course the big question, it's a bit like when they say house prices are coming down. It's like, well, by how much? Are they coming down by 50%? Because that's what some first-time buyers would like to see. Or are they coming down by 0.1%?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is this. You now got 11 tenants looking for one property where 4 months ago it used to be 16. So the supply and demand has leveled up a bit. Yeah, so there's been more supply coming in, even though landlords are coming in. There's big institutional investors buying, and I'm seeing a client tomorrow that got 3,500 units. I'm training them, and they're buying another 2,000 units. So there's a lot of big corporate landlords, pension funds that are buying blocks and coming into the private rental sector, which I think generally the government prefer bigger institutional landlords rather than smaller landlords, Ian.
Yeah, does that, I mean, maybe the bigger institutions can weather the difficulties or the changes to the things like the Renters' Rights Bill, etc. They're able to do that. They've got the money behind them to do it. And, you know, if you're the accidental landlord or you just have 2 or 3 properties, then maybe some of that legislation. We were at the Landlord Investment Show, Paul, big panel of experts. I was chairing it. Somehow you made it onto the panel, which was great to see. You know,
I mean, you did beg me to come on.
Exactly, yeah. Fees were paid, of course. But no, it was great to see you there. And you remember at the end of that particular session, we asked, I said to the audience of landlords, you know, put your hand up if you're completely across the detail of the Renters' Rights Bill. And there were loads of people who simply weren't. They still didn't quite, you know, have their head around what these changes mean. Some of that, you know, is about a lack of information. And when you've got that information, correct, a lack of confidence and uncertainty is what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is being a landlord is a profession. It should be deemed as a job. It should be deemed as, you know, making sure you're offering your customer, the tenant, the best service possible. If you can't do that or you don't have the time, then you need to use an accredited letting agent. I mean, we did a survey recently and 47% of letting agents still don't have a proper hand on the Renters' Rights Bill because nothing's been announced in law. But they are the biggest changes. And look, the reality is that tenants need greater security, and that's why this bill has come in. Landlords need to look long term, and there's still lots of landlords buying and selling from each other. But of course, the good old days of landlords earning loads of money is not like it was not like it used to be, because of course they had 0% interest rates as well.
Of course. What's interesting about this is that the whole bill that's coming in terms of landlords and what it means for tenants and affordability of rents. I mean, there is an argument that says actually it may well put rents up a bit, because some of the changes to legislation seem to favour, some landlords argue, seem to favour the tenant over the landlord. And as a result of that, certain insecurities that landlords didn't have previously in terms of things like deposits and, you know, evictions and all sorts of other options that are going to be closed off to landlords could mean that landlords go, well, OK, I'll just stick the rent up a little bit so I cover my backside in that way.
That is the reality. Landlords are putting rents up before this bill comes in, because there's new laws coming in with regard to rent rises and first-tier tribunal. There's been a change with regard to that initially they changed the bill. I don't understand why they changed the bill. That, you know, I think quite rightly a landlord should rent out to a tenant that wants a pet. I think it's good for mental health and good for stability. And the landlord can request for the tenant to pay for pet insurance for damage, which is quite reasonable.
Yep.
But then the government have changed their mind in the amendments and said, no, the landlord has to pay for the insurance, not the tenant. So if you were my tenant and you're coming in with your Alsatian, as a landlord, bearing in mind I'm getting loads of costs, would I want to pay the insurance?
Yeah, who conjured up that idea? I mean, it depends on the pet as well. I mean, a bit troubling if you've got an otter or something. I mean, that might be tricky.
Or goldfish.
Or goldfish. Yeah, indeed. So the landlord should have to pay the insurance for someone's
it makes
dog,
no sense.
like, you know, chewing up the skirting boards and God knows what else in the bathroom or the kitchen.
I know. Look, I represent, one of the companies I represent is My Deposits. We're one of the major deposit schemes, and you know we protect like £1.3 billion worth of deposits and deal with deposit disputes. And actually, pet damage is actually quite low. But the thing is, landlords need confidence. You know, tenants want. I mean, the average term now, I think, is something like a tenant moving in to a property, is something living in a property is something like just under 3 years. So tenants are staying longer.
Yep.
You know, depending on the type of property, you know, you can't have anti-bidding wars, so you can't have an auction, you can't have discrimination. So lots of the stuff. I mean, Awab's Law, the poor little boy that died, you know, with regard to mould and condensation. A lot of the stuff should come in and will come in, and it will make renting better.
100%.
But landlords need to up their game and be more educated.
Indeed. You are always on the circuit talking about this stuff. You'll be back at the Landlord Investment Show, Paul, in the autumn. I think you're doing Bristol, Manchester and London.
I am, yes, and I'm doing loads of other talks all over the country as well for landlords and agents, and just spreading the word of being a professional landlord and helping tenants out.
Well, if you want more details of where you can see Paul, Landlord Investment Show, Google it, look it up, check those dates, get along to some of the debates as well that are there, and find out more information for yourself, because, of course, it is a massive area of ambiguity. It's foggy for landlords, it's foggy for tenants, and the Labour government, too late to moan about it too much because this thing is coming in, but the Labour government have definitely, I think anyway, they've taken that line of, like, you know, landlords bad, tenants good, and that of course can sometimes be the case, but it's rarely the case, frankly. Almost, you know, relatively speaking, as a proportion, it's tiny. And it works the same the other way around, probably more of a problem the other way around. But it's meant that landlords are left in this kind of no man's land of, well, what am I meant to do? Do I put rents up? That doesn't address the wider problem of affordability in housing. It's absolutely huge. And this is coming in. And the upshot, as you can imagine, if landlords are thinking, well, I'm going to be collared for this, that and the other, and it's going to be more risky, I think that's perhaps the area. There's going to be more uncertainty in terms of the stability of this. I've been told, you know, that by some people politically that, you know, I'm part of a rogue industry, but simultaneously I'm being asked to legislate as if I'm some kind of Russian plutocrat who owns 10,000 units somewhere. Can't be both ways. So as a result, what I'll do to protect myself with new legislation coming in, which you think is a bit risky as a landlord, I'm going to up my rent in the meantime, cover my backside a little bit. Thank you to Paul Champlina. Always good to have Paul on. Back to you in a few moments. 0344 499 1000.
I said at the time, this bill is not going to work. I actually managed to get it watered down. The version we're seeing is the watered down version. It's very hard, when you're in government. There are lots of people who want certain measures. We do need to do things to protect children from a lot of the harm that's online. But I could just see the way it was written, that as usual, it would go after people doing perfectly legitimate things, and the bad guys will still find a way to circumvent the rules. This is the story of our times.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
John in Suffolk says, on that issue of pets, I've had tenants that just leave and leave their pets there too. I mean, who would do that? Actually, you come back as the landlord and just open the door and there's a llama or something standing there in the... Who would leave their pet? Whether it was a little goldfish or some kind of gerbil situation, whatever it was. That's just unkind to the beast, right? Let's go back to your calls. John is in the Dordogne. John, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. The business with Nigel and this Labour bloke.
You mean the Prime Minister?
It's obvious that Nigel basically gave all that info to Trump yesterday.
Yeah.
It's not on the cards, isn't it? So they realise that, and what they're doing is getting their own back on him, and it's all backfired.
So it's backfired on Starmer.
On Peter Carl. I mean, he's getting.
I mean, why would he even go? I mean, I don't believe Peter Carl kind of
stupid.
Well, they are, but I don't think he rehearsed the line beforehand, right? Did he just come out with it?
Don't know. I think they know Nigel set Starmer up, and it's just revenge, and it'll be like that when Nigel gets up to talk tomorrow, maybe in question.
Yeah.
They'll do the same. It's all going to be shouting and screaming at him,
But every time this happens, Nigel Farage becomes more popular.
He does, without question. And if they didn't know what a VPN was, my God.
Yeah, that's a bit worrying, isn't it, when you're the science minister?
They are so stupid.
I mean, I could understand it if you're in charge of agriculture or, something like you could go, sorry, it's not my territory, mate, don't really know. But, yeah, curious times we are living in. Great call, John. Thank you very much indeed for that. Matt says, Billy from Belfast is bang on, absolutely correct. You need to study this a bit more as you're very dismissive of this, Ian. Well, I've probably read more on this kind of stuff than any human being should be made to read. And I'm talking about all the kind of WEF stuff, World Health Organization, Agenda 2030, United Nations. And there's always some iffy bits of groupthink that go on in those kind of places. There's no doubt about it. I've never disputed that. Overarching, overreaching lobby groups, which essentially is what some of these organizations are. And of course, any organisation where you are given untold money donated from collective governments has one ambition, and that's to become bigger and more powerful. You almost can't stop them. It's kind of, it's sort of a human instinct almost. Yeah, we can get, and you have a grand title like the World Health Organization. Naturally, you go, well, that's the World Health. Why would you not listen? I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have a World Health Organization every day of the week, but you'd have a good one and one that would work. If there's a pandemic snaking its way around planet Earth, you kind of want to have a sort of, not necessarily a uniform response in terms of lockdown, but you'd like some uniformity in terms of information and how best to deal with something. The trouble is, with organisations like this, they punch above their weight. So you end up getting obfuscation from some of these places. You can't follow, for love nor money, what the hell is going on. The problem about reading stuff, to address Matt's point on this, it depends where you read it, Matt. I would absolutely throw that out there to begin with. What you read and where you read. Fact check, triple source, everything. And again, I come back to that meme that was doing the rounds, and I can't remember specifically what it said. It was, well, I've seen loads of these over the years, but it was something like the United Nations 2 weeks ago announced that they were voted, that was it, they voted for a one world government, basically. And this did the rounds, and it got, I don't know how many millions of people animated about it. And I, along with others, thought, well, that's a big story, isn't it? The United Nations just voted for a one world. We haven't heard anything about it. I must have a little gander at this. And I, went through my usual steps. When you've done this job long enough, there's some obvious points of call that you go to. I don't mean individuals you ring, but just ways that you research quite efficiently and quite swiftly. And then you do a double dive into some of this stuff. And it didn't happen. There was no evidence of this at all, anywhere. None whatsoever. But there it was. It was out there. I saw one yesterday, which was purporting to be a letter that was signed off by Boris Johnson. This was a slightly different point, where he had okayed the intelligence services in the UK to spy on Donald Trump as requested by Barack Obama. And this letter that just sat there in isolation on social media had been shared something like 5.8 million times across the board, and probably more elsewhere. But there was no authentication of the letter. It was just a letter. You could have notched it up on your laptop, for God's sake. Absolutely nothing to say whether it was true or not. And that's the kind of stuff you've got to ignore and just do your own research and dig deep. You might come out with a view the same as Bill is, by the way. Peter Cardwell is here, who loves a conspiracy, Peter, don't you?
Yes, I've got my tinfoil hat on.
Do you believe man landed on the moon?
I do.
Fool. Seriously?
I also believe David Kelly took his own life, and I'm really. And the JFK was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald from
when you
Texas,
look into
Texas
it,
Repository.
they are the most
unacted alone. Yes.
They are the most obvious. The true answer is usually the most obvious one.
Yes. There's a very good book actually by David Aronovich, who is a thoughtful man. He's not someone I always agree. Oh, you've read his book?
Yeah, about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
We had him on actually. This was years